Good afternoon. Today is October 6th. It's 1:30 or 1:31 p.m. 1:31 p.m. We're opening the public session of the Laredo Fire Collective Bargaining Negotiation Sessions. We are filling in the sign-in sheets, I believe. Everyone signed them? Great. Okay, let's start it off so you can see both of them.
Okay.
Okay. And we have a session, this is over here. Okay, and we have a session scheduled for this afternoon, and we also have one scheduled for tomorrow, beginning at 9 a.m. on Friday, October 7th, 2022. To begin with, let's see, I just wanted to follow up on I think there were 3 pending grievances. 2 had been formally dismissed by written document, is that right?
Mhm.
And I'm just following up on the 3rd one. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Mr. Delgado's that was outstanding
The exchange.
on the exchanges, whether that has been dismissed as well.
There is a little hiccup with that. The grievance that was filed was for the memo that was placed out, addressing a certain language, which was corrected with the memo, but then the policy came out right after that. And it mirrors the same language that was in the original grievance from the memo.
Have you
So,
discussed that with the chief or the legal department?
We just talked about this, when was it, yesterday?
Okay,
So,
so out of the 3 grievances related to outside employment policy, 2 have been formally dismissed. Is that correct? Or
yes,
has the the paperwork been done to dismiss them?
yes, on mine,
No,
you didn't get yours right, Chapa.
no, we haven't met with the chief.
You haven't met with the chief? So what is the status, I guess, what is the status of the grievance? Because at the last meeting on September 29th, I understood that the 2 grievances with regard to the policy,
The outside employment policy.
the outside employment policy, were going to be dismissed.
Mhm.
And, but it sounds like they still have not yet been dismissed. And then we had the outstanding one with regard to the memo that was, Mr. Delgado wasn't here the last time. So we hadn't been able to discuss that. But so what is the status of all of those? Are those going, the 2 on the outside employment policy,
There
are
was
those going to
one-
be, is
there
that
was-
resolved?
There was one on outside employment.
Yeah, that was
policy,
mine,
And
that was mine,
you signed it,
and two on the
here,
memo.
you signed it here,
yeah, I
one of
actually
those
have
days
it.
that we were here at the fact. Correct.
Okay,
And then I was just waiting for the memo to come out, so I could remove my grievance. And then Oscar was in the same boat as I was.
oh, so there was 1 on the policy and 2 on the memos?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I was confused about that.
Yes.
Oscar's grievance though was, he retracted the last memo. So it basically, it's
Yeah,
obsolete
my
now.
grievance will,
But he put out a new
Policy.
exchange policy.
Right.
Which will trigger a new grievance.
So it's triggering a new grievance.
Yeah, because it's the same exact
He's
wording.
using the same wording that was in violation because he had included the exchanges and payback wording in the outside employment policy. So that wording has been corrected, but then he included that same wording in an exchange payback policy that he put out, and he added some more contract violations as far as timeframes, limits, and things like that, that have gone against how we've been running this part of the contract for several decades now. So the new policy will trigger a new grievance, because that one was based off the outside employment policy. This is the exchange payback policy.
The
New
exchange
policy
payback policy.
That he had just
it's
put
gonna
out.
be the same grievance, but for a
It's
different.
because the original,
language from the memo to the policy,
it's a policy.
so.
Okay,
That
so,
makes sense.
and what are the violations that are going to be grieved on?
He's limiting how you can use exchanges and paybacks. He's limiting the number of times you can extend a payback. He's limiting the timeframes on the paybacks and exchanges.
Okay, that's a little bit fast. Okay, he's limiting how you can use
Or when and why.
exchanges and
What reason
paybacks?
for, yes.
He addressed
Reason
it,
for.
and now his policies are conflicting because the outside employment states how you can use exchanges and paybacks, and that's more inclusive than what the exchange and payback policy is. That wording doesn't mirror each other. He's actually limited.
So, and is this exchange and payback policy a new policy or one that was
It's a-
already standing?
no,
Okay,
it's a
and when
new
was that policy?
Last week,
Release.
Last week or 2 weeks ago.
I'm not exactly sure, I wasn't at work last week, so I.
It's,
found out
the
about
policy
this.
says September, it doesn't have an exact date. I don't know when he signed
But it
it.
was- I think it was like last week, I wanna say.
Might be
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
Thursday.
He even went as far as to limit, as far as how many, it wasn't kind of clear, the percentage of employees working at a certain time, and that would change how you could pay them
September
back.
27th.
And so, but what is the specific, what are the specific articles, I guess, that, do you know what specific articles your,
It
the
would
union
be-
is claiming are being violated?
It'd be the exchange and paybacks, or is that, what articles are there?
10.4.
10.
10, well,
You
10,
mean, you have the policy?
10.1?
It's, there
On
was
mine,
4
it's
articles?
six- On mine, I have it here. On mine is
4?
gonna be 6.4, 10.4,
That's 6.4?
yes, 10.4. 32.
Oh, so this is just, that is arbitrary
Yeah.
capricious? Okay, so the
Right.
catch-all, what's the next one?
10.4.
10.4, okay.
The one that actually spells out exchange and
Okay.
paybacks. He also put an hour limit, 4 hours. That exchanges cannot be less than 4 hours.
Brings it up to 5 exchanges per month.
It's on the payback.
This doesn't say anything about payback.
Payback's at the last hour per hour.
Yeah.
It says you exchange your payments are hour for hour, and it's always been understood, back when Chief Sosa signed it, 2 fire chiefs ago, that anything for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever was needed, as long as it was paid back hour for an hour. The whole purpose of this article is so that someone will be there at work covering the shift. And it had nothing to do with who was there or one individual.
Yeah.
So he also included a wording as if 90% or less of the FTEs staffing are firefighters, then the payback has to be completed within a certain timeframe.
Certain time frames.
If there's more, and our article has always been, you set the payback, the standard rule is 120 days, which Chief Sosa, Steve Landine, Chief Landine had in place. It was always understood, but as long as we notified, and even the new T8 agreement, that as long as you give notice on extending, that it's allowed. The policy now states that you can only extend it once and only for 30 days.
So currently, on 10.4, this is under duty hours. Says firefighters may be granted up to 5 exchanges per month upon the approval of the fire station's district chief, captain, or acting captain. Further provided that the person filling in as part of the exchange is qualified to perform the duties for the person requesting the exchange, that such exchange will not disrupt normal fire department operations. Shift exchanges will be paid back hour for hour. Date of payback must be stated on the work exchange form, but may be changed as needed and agreed upon by employees. And that's where we, on the TA, we added notification of any
Right.
changes of the, or extension of that date has to be given.
And it's just giving notice
So-
to who's at work.
So here, there's already shift exchanges paid back hour for hour, and date of payback must be stated on work exchange. Where in the contract does it say how long a shift exchange can be?
How long it can be?
Right, because
It's
here,
5
it says
exchanges,
firefighters may be
it's
granted the 5 exchanges per month upon the it has to have approval. Right, okay.
So it's understood that anything under the 24 hours, one shift is what we consider an exchange. The day or the 2 days, the shift that you're scheduled for.
But it's not defined as such, right?
Right. It's not defined,
So it's not defined, why would it be a violation?
because we've been doing it this way for 30, 40 years. We can write it in if you want. In that case, then I can make a 74-hour exchange.
Within the shift, you said.
It
Oh,
has,
no, I'm, that's what I'm using, but I'm
But
asking a
but
question.
that's what I'm
Can I
asking,
make
I'm
a
asking,
120-hour exchange?
so what I'm asking,
Because it's not defined.
well, that's gonna be up to the
So I can
the
approve it?
management, that's gonna have to be up to the approval by management in order, so it does not affect the department's operations, right? That's
So,
stated in the contract,
the
and a
whole-
contract a grievance is a violation of a provision of the contract.
Right.
So here we have on 10.4, it outlines certain things with regard to exchange and paybacks. Is there any other part of the contract that discusses paybacks and exchanges?
It discusses it specifically, no.
Okay,
And the grievance is mostly dealing with the paybacks, correct? Because the exchanges,
I-
according to the, I'm so sorry. As far as the policy is concerned, you're allowed to have, under the policy, 5 exchanges, which is in the contract, and then paybacks is not limited to 5 paybacks a month.
No.
That's not the limitation, so is the grievance based on the limitations in time or the amount of times in which you can kick the payback down the road?
Partially is the grievance on the exchange. He's now saying you can do 4 hours. We've never had an issue with up to 24 hours, which I'm asking.
4 hours for what? I don't understand what that.
Yeah, I
He's
don't-
saying there's a limit of the least amount of exchange you can do is 4 hours.
The minimum amount.
And I know why it's come up, because I personally have done it. I'll get an exchange for 2 hours, then I'll take an 8-hour sick leave, because under our policy, I can leave at 10 a.m. So I'll have the captain in the morning cover for me 2 hours, we'll do a 2-hour exchange, and then I'll take 8-hour sick leave. So in order to circumvent the new policy and how we do it, this policy has come up, right?
so you're
So-
taking a sick leave,
I can take sick leave from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So the
Okay.
captain in the morning, say on C shift, as I'm coming in, I'll make a 2-hour exchange with him. Say that the shift prior, he'll work for 2 hours, then and I can go on sick leave at 10 a.m.
oh, so
So I can
you
make
get,
it
so then you get the
2 hours,
whole day?
No, I'll just.
Is
I
that
come
like you
back
get
at
the
6
benefit
p.m.
of the whole day, but you don't have to go in?
I could go in, I could take the whole day, but I'll take an 8-hour sick leave for whatever reason.
Right, but what I'm saying is you do the exchange so that you don't have to come in the whole
Right,
day. So
right.
that someone covers you for the 2 hours
And
and
then
you
I
take
take
the
my
allowed
sick
sick leave.
Because if I took sick leave at 8 to 4, say I would be back at 5, it wouldn't fit my schedule. So I can do an exchange and then shift the 8 hours back, what's allowed under the policy. And we do the 8 hours so that it mirrors the overtime policy, so we don't have basically double staffing. So we've formulated it this way so that we can, there's always someone that can cover.
When you
we don't
say
have-
we formulated it this way, who's formulated it
Oh,
that
it's in
way?
the contract.
In the contract.
Oh, okay.
It's in the contract. So
Article
the
23.
association worded it, Chief Landine signed off on it, he made the tweaks he wanted, and so that was put into the last contract. So it's the exchange policy, the sick leave policy, and the overtime policy, it's not in the contract, it's agreed on by the president and the fire chief, mirrors these 8-hour blocks so that we don't have double staffing. The issue is
The-
always double staffing,
The union president has to agree to the policy for it
Yes.
to be in
the
place?
overtime policy.
And where,
It's
the
in the
overtime
contract.
policy?
Yes.
Right, okay, but what about the exchange policy, payback policy, and the outside
So
employment
just what's
policy?
mentioned in the contract, and the policy is basically what we had agreed to, or how we've been operating. So it was always the 120
So it's
days.
within the management rights of the city, right, to set the policy?
Uh,
That's within the
on
contract
certain
parameters?
aspects, on certain aspects, I would say yes, but not in the case where now we're changing when we can exchange or how. That's our stance.
Okay.
I get the city stance will be, well, I can change policy whenever I want.
Why, if it's not in the contract, then why wouldn't the city be able to change the policy?
Well, it's a condition of employment, it's based on hours, wages, and privileges, so.
Right, and we
these
bargain on that, and there's certain hours, wages, and conditions of employment that we agree to in the
are In the
contract.
contract,
Right.
and then there's some that we agree to outside of the contract that are agreed to upon signing of the contract, which Article 31, I think it's 29 references,
And what is that?
the maintenance of standards.
32.
Which I know,
32.
32.1.
So, and when we
Which I know
talked
the city's
about,
trying to read
and-
it or
right.
clarify the wording.
so, and this is something important because Article 32, we have a proposal to you on the
Right.
maintenance of standards, because a maintenance of standards, this provision is not intended as a catch-all for the union to be able to grieve or say, well, city, you were more generous than what the contract did, now you're contractually obligated because we have this weird catch-all phrase. That's not what that's intended. In fact, it's been said at the table and out, here we've identified the maintenance of standards means that the privileges and conditions of employment at effect of the time of the execution of the contract will remain in place. And
Right.
when it's talking about the conditions and privileges, it's what is outlined in the contract. Because if what you're talking about, that this basically takes away any and all management rights of the city, That goes in conflict with Article 6, right? Because what this contract is, the city is negotiating, and there are certain management rights it gives away in exchange for something. This is negotiation, right? Everybody, it's a give and take between both parties. So,
So I agree,
So,
up to the
right.
point where the city stance in the past has been, look, we're not gonna get into the weeds as far as writing out the policy, that the union and the fire chief agree to it, and then we agree that that's what stays in place for the life of the contract. And if that's the case, that's what we were discussing earlier, if that's the case, that's fine, so be it. If this is gonna be the city's new stance, then I think the association should be allowed to propose the language that we currently have in place, so that that gets locked into the contract.
and
Because
what are you
basically
gonna, and
what's
what are
being
you
done
gonna
is our
give,
certain
what are you
rights.
gonna give the city in exchange for that? Because that is
You're
not a
gonna make
contractual
requests of orders. It's
obligation
a-
right now.
Well, we feel it is in the contract, right? We do feel that the contract implies it for it to be in effect. The maintenance standards is there. I understand why the city is saying you wanted to change the wording to what's only written into the contract. That's not clarifying it, that's
That's-
redefining it.
What you're saying right now is in complete contradiction what was discussed by the union already with regard to the understanding of what the maintenance of standards provision was.
Right, so the union stance was
And-
only what's in the writing in the contract.
What we have, and this is what we proposed, because
Alright, that's the union
based upon the
stance.
discussion that we had, is that on 32,
And let me say, if that's the union stance, then I retract my
I don't,
last
I don't
statement
think, I don't
and we can
think,
move forward.
unless I was in here part of those conversations, I don't think we'd ever agreed to, that was our stance on it.
so does the maintenance of standards, in the unions, based on the union's understandings, does the maintenance of standards take away everything that is in Article 6, which is the management rights?
No, it just states hours, wages and conditions of employment and privileges in effect at the signing of the contract will stay in for the life of the contract.
Right, and when we discussed that with the union at the very beginning, they said whatever is subject to the agreement, and it doesn't create additional
And
contractual
and that's what I'm saying,
obligations.
if the
Right.
union stance is only what's worded in the contract.
And I'm not
then-
trying to, I'm not.
No, then I
I'm not,
retract my
I'm
statement.
not trying to say, and the record will speak for
That
itself.
was what they
Yeah,
proposed.
so that's what I'm saying, if
Right,
that's the
but the
case,
record will
I
speak
wasn't
for
here, I
itself.
retract my statement.
And when we propose this, we propose it because of what the discussion had been, because we discussed the article on maintenance of standards before we did that. And it becomes important when we have things like this, because we have different chiefs all the time. We don't always have the same chief.
Right.
And different chiefs like to run their departments differently. They have different ideas for how to make the department better, how to make it more efficient, how to be able to manage the operations and the staff that it has in order to make sure that that there is no impeding on the operations, that it runs as smoothly as possible, and that we get the most out of the services that we provide to the city. So sometimes, even though, and I keep hearing, this is past practice, or this is what's always been done, or whatever, just because it's always been done, or you deem it, you deem it as past practice, which is an actual legal term that has different elements it must meet.
Okay, which are,
I don't have them in front of me, and I'd be happy to provide those to you, but it's a legal issue when you're going to arbitration.
because that could clarify even
But-
on how we view some of the issues, right?
But, right, and so anytime that, we're set by the contract, and I've had this discussion before, and say, for instance, everything's going very smoothly, we have, extra staff, people, we're like, okay, you can do exchanges more often than the 5, or you can do it this way, because the contract says that you're allowed up to 5 if approved, and that payback's gonna be done hour for hour, and it has to be stated at that place, and then you can extend it. There's nothing in the contract that defines how long an exchange can be or can't be. And so within the operations, they say, okay, you can take 72 hours or whatever it was that you said. But then the other chief comes in and says, hey, this is not working. It's making me issues. I'm having to put units offline. I'm having to call in people. It's costing me overtime. Things aren't working out. It's just not, it may have worked in a very specific time period, but it's not working from now on. And then they change it. And then we have the union come in and say, whoa, that was what was happening before. That's a maintenance of standards, yet it falls well within the management rights of the city. That's where this becomes a major
No,
issue.
and I agree, and
Right.
that's to use your argument, And that's why, or to use, you're stating that, that's why we understand that we don't go over 24 hours. It's one shift per shift because of whether there's overtime or not. The other issue affecting operations, it doesn't, which is why when we negotiated, it clearly spells out rank for rank. If a captain is gonna be out, another captain's replacing him, there will be no overtime. There is no issue unless that chief officer thinks the captain coming in is inadequate. Other than that, it's remove one piece and you insert an equal piece at the same time. It shouldn't affect operations one bit.
So let me ask
Now,
you,
just if I can finish.
sure,
The wages, conditions of employment and privileges in effect at the time of the contract, like you stated, you're gonna bring in different chiefs 1 year to the next, change the chiefs during the contract maybe 3 times if that's the city stance. And what we didn't want was their conditions of employment and privileges to be fluctuating left and right because every chief that came in just decided to revamp the entire process, which is why most of these things are in the contract now. Now, there's some things that the city stance has been in the past, look, operationally, you guys figure that out. The perfect example is for me to call in for a vacation day. The vacation hours and slots and how we do it is in the contract, but the chief has stated, it used to be you gotta call in before 6:30 AM. Now it's before 6 AM, or 7 AM, now it's 6:30 AM. It used to be you can call in anytime at night, now it's 11 PM at night. And we've made those modifications through the life of the contracts because the chief has reached out to the association, hey, we have a condition of employment, I wanna change it, here are reasons why, you know what, chief, that's fine, we can do it that way, we have no issue. The issue here is when you completely try to restrict what was in place during the contract, what had been agreed to for decades now. And then now, because we want to hang our hat on Article 6, basically the chief can change anything. We agree that he can change anything that's not in the contract or any working conditions or conditions of employment or privileges that have been approved at the signing of the contract. Outside of that, the chief can maneuver and change policy as he wishes. I agree.
okay. Well,
I
then,
just-
we also need to discuss, then we probably need to discuss the TA on the articles that are gonna be grieved, because as you know, this is a new contract. This is not the old contract.
Mhm.
So any grievance filed on the old contract goes away, because now we're gonna be signing a new contract.
Right. Signing a new contract would basically state that this is the new way of doing the exchanges. So that's one thing one thing we've been discussing, why so many policies, new policies are coming out during the contract negotiations. And if there's such a big issue with how the contract is worded, my opinion is that the association should work on that wording in the contract. If we have a difference of opinion on what is a condition of employment and what is in the contract or governed by it, then I would say we negotiate and put it into the
Right,
contract.
and if you want to negotiate for us to give up, the city to give up management rights, then what's the city gonna get in return for that?
Oh, I
That's
don't
gonna be-
believe,
that's
I don't
gonna be
believe
part
that
of the
we're
consideration.
negotiating, giving up or taking away any of the city's management rights. All we're saying is these policies or these conditions of employment have been in place for decades now. If the city wants to change them, then the city should propose that in the contract, not be a.
Whether, if they're not
external
in the,
policy.
even if they're not in the contract?
We feel they're governed by the contract, which is what triggers the
Okay.
grievance, so that we
So-
can go down our dispute resolution process so that.
So
that can be
basically,
addressed.
the chief has no say in any kind of changes or how he runs his department, that everything's gonna have
I
to be in
think
the
you're
contract?
Taking it to an extreme limit, but if that's how
That's
the
what it
city wants
sounded
to
like,
perceive
so.
it. I just, explain to me how a condition of employment that's in place at the signing of the contract can be changed if the articles clearly states that anything that's a condition of employment or privilege in effect at the signing of the contract will stay in effect. It doesn't say it has to be in writing, it doesn't say it has to be into the contract.
So anything that.
Condition of
And this
employment?
is, right,
Yeah, and it's not anything,
anything
'cause
that's
it's
gonna affect
conditions
you
of
is gonna be a
employment are
condition of
narrow.
employment then.
It is,
So that's what I'm saying, is that,
I mean, that's partly
Does that
defined by case
basically-
law and.
does that article, the way that you're saying it, nullify all of the management rights that are,
No,
left in
I don't
place?
think it does.
okay. All right, I think we have to have,
I have a question. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. So I'm confused as to why the policy, why the grievant believes that it's in violation of 10.4. I just explain it to me. I would.
Oh, the exchange paybacks, it doesn't state that it's limited or you have to have it with a certain time, it just says,
What's
The-
limited, and again, I know you say exchange paybacks synonymously,
The
but as I learned
paybacks.
later on, that they're two different things,
Yeah,
so
the payback.
please just let me
So,
know.
so the payback,
Yes,
I'm gonna exchange with Chapa. I
yes,
fill out the form, I get my chief's permission. He's working for me January 1st, I'm paying him back March 3rd. He comes back, hey, guess what, March 3rd doesn't work for me, I'm gonna go ahead and change the date.
Mhm.
If we're in agreement, we modify that contract, okay, we're in agreement, we change it, we notify the proper channels.
Mhm.
The fire chief new policy is saying, you can only do that once and that's it. But then something comes up, and Chapa's like, you know what, I'm not gonna need that day after all, my kid's, party got canceled, I'm gonna extend it to this day, can you do that day? Yes, I can. This doesn't affect operations because there will be a captain there. It's better than denying him and then him taking an annual leave or sick leave for whatever reason, whatever it was he was gonna cover, and he takes the proper leave, because then it would cause a vacancy.
okay.
In the past, we've used the exchanges and paybacks so that we don't affect operations.
Of course,
The fire chiefs in the past would rather have you and make an exchange because I have a body there, I don't need to hire overtime. And now this limiting of it, we just don't know, or I don't know what the reasoning for it.
if I may, because I've been involved in this, so under the current system, the way it is, technically speaking, you can kick that payback into oblivion.
Right,
So,
the way it is right now.
the way it is right now.
Okay.
And I think that the reasoning behind it is that if you have all these paybacks and you kick them way down the road, you could technically have a firefighter that's out for
5 years.
6 months to a year, 5 years, whatever.
Yes,
Do you think that it is in the best interest of the citizens of Laredo that are relying on the training of the firefighters to go out and help them when they've been off of their job for 5 months? And let's
Right.
hypothetically
Right.
speaking, let's say they were out on vacation for 5 years, they weren't doing a second job,
they were getting ready to retire.
getting ready to retire.
Yeah,
They come
I'm
back,
with you.
they're out on the job, and because they've missed trainings, because they haven't been practicing their craft for the last 5 years, you think that that firefighter is good enough to be giving services to someone in need?
No, I do not, and I agree 100%. All I'm saying is, if the city wants to propose a change, we're at the right venue to do it.
So
That's all I'm saying.
you're proposing just a new article on paybacks and exchanges?
I'm proposing that if you want to change the current, like you said, this is exactly how we do it right now. I'm proposing if the city wants to change that, then we work on the wording and we negotiate it. We're not proposing it. You said it yourself. The current practice is we can pay back whenever we want, right? Pretty much, right? As long as we give notice and sign the paperwork. If the city is proposing that we limit that, then that's something the city is requesting. I guess the difference of opinion is whether that's contractual or not. We believe it is. So if
Is
this
it something in 143 that's guaranteed by 143?
exchanges and paybacks, I don't know, in our version, I don't think so. This is a contract issue.
Right, well, the contract is specifically to negotiate the requirements of 143.
It's specifically only to negotiate the contract
It's
143.
you can
The
be
contract can
more-
only be used to negotiate 143 is what?
Well, 143 requirement set the conditions of employment, the hours, work duties, et cetera. So when we're looking at that, the reason I say that is because if there's not a requirement under 143,
Then we can't
then it
negotiate
it's part of the management rights. The management rights that are set by Article 6.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, I understood negotiating a contract, any issue on the table that the parties want to entertain.
It
we
is, but it
negotiate.
requires
I
that the
didn't- I
city
didn't-
give
I
up
didn't-
a management right.
Well, I didn't think that we're limited to only what's in 143.
It
Is
is,
that-
it's not, what's renegotiating the requirements, and if it's not in 143, then that's, the management has the right to,
If not addressed. in the contract.
if it's not addressed in the contract,
Or-
right?
or
And if
to-
it's
or-
addressed
or
in the
implying to one of
contract,
its
if it's
articles.
addressed in the contract, then the city is giving away its management rights to manage that particular issue.
And I don't know why chiefs in the past have given up some of the rights or not, but whoever was at the table and they negotiated. What we stand by is whoever was here and that was negotiated, if it wants to be changed, then it should be negotiated again. Now, I don't believe that we can only negotiate what's in 143. I'm sure there's mandatory
I didn't say that
conditions.
it's only, but I'm saying, what I was making the distinction was between 143 requirements and what are management rights.
Right.
Right?
Now, and I know you're going to the umbrella of saying that everything is is gonna be a maintenance of standards, and no, it's not, it's actually limited, there's not that many things. It has to do with annual leaves, when we call in sick, and things like that, but mostly everything that we do in operations is pretty much up to management rights. But this article mentioning how it affects operations, or this policy, this doesn't affect, if anything, this tool has been used to assist operations. So,
It does until it doesn't, right? Because going by.
like the example you gave,
Yeah.
perfectly, but that has never happened.
But the possibility is it can be, or let's just say
Well,
it's not
yes.
5 years. It
Yes,
could be a year, it could be 6 months.
and I agree with you. Now, the fireman would still have to keep up with his certifications and his
Mhm.
training, so he'd be a certified firefighter. If you mean that he would lose maybe the feel of it because he's not on the fire truck every shift, I agree with you.
Have there been firefighters that have been able to take off a month or two with exchanges?
Yes, all right.
The vacation cycle used to be a
Now-
month.
There,
With paybacks.
with pay, I don't think that anyone has ever done full month paybacks. I know they've done exchanges, annual leave, paybacks to make sure that, I did it to go to law school, right? I would come on the weekends, I would work on the weekends, I would do exchanges, annual leaves and paybacks. Under our rules and under our guidelines, I paid back within the 120 days. I complied with every policy that was out there, I complied with the contract, and yes, I was able to do it. I don't feel it affect my performance. This was questioned during council, multiple of my immediate supervisors spoke on the issue. But I can see a scenario of like what you're talking about. All I'm saying is that in that case, if the city wants to change it, then it should be done via the collective bargaining agreement.
And if I'm
But
not
what
mistaken-
if, but the city already has the management rights to do that.
Well, then I guess then,
If it's not already
well, I guess then you're
outlined
asking
specifically.
why
in
the grievance, and we're explaining why.
Right.
And I guess
Okay.
your stance
You
is
believe that
we don't
it's,
agree.
it's not the management's right to do that?
I believe it is their right, but there's an avenue to do it, and this is the avenue, the contract negotiation.
I don't think it works that way. Either they have the management right to change it or they don't, because you're saying.
Well, then in that case, they
Under-
don't have the right to change that.
Okay, and that's
Via-
fine, so they
via the
don't have the
contract
management rights to regulate paybacks, is what you're saying, or
Oh, say that again?
they do not, you're saying that Article 6 does not give the chief the management. And just for clarification, for education, I know there's a longer period for the paybacks for education, your law school would have been covering that, correct?
And I didn't use it for this sole reason that council or the city was gonna attack it. I made sure I followed, not the school exchanges, which was more lenient and really has never been put in writing. I made sure I followed the one in writing because I knew what would happen with, if anyone in the city was gonna question it. So I didn't follow the school exchanges that were unlimited. I followed the 120-day rule. And the reason why, I made sure I did the 5 exchanges, I made sure I used my annual leaves, I kept track of my data, I sent it to my district chiefs, I sent it to the assistant fire chief, for the sole reason, someone in the city was gonna complain about it. So I made sure I followed every rule. Now, I've been told that school exchanges are allowed and you can pay them back whenever, I didn't follow that when I went to school.
And that's fine. I'm just saying that they're, just so it's clear for the record that if the city of Laredo is incentivizing firefighters to go get an education, where people who are not in the fire, are firefighters,
Mhm.
just have to go to school on their own accord while they're not working, and giving that flexibility, and just.
Well, the new policy cuts it down to 9 months now on the payback for school. You're saying it's unlimited?
No, I never said it was unlimited, I said
Oh,
it was a
you-
larger
you-
period of
Oh,
time
okay.
than the
Then
90 days,
I-
so just for
understand.
clarification.
But this policy again is limiting that as well. And we're not even discussing the school exchange, we're just discussing what's in place for 120 days.
I don't think the city incentivizes, right? I mean, the firefighters have to work the days back, so they're not getting extra days to have to go back to school.
Oh, yeah, but this is one of the only jobs where
I
you
mean, I
can
guess
work,
it's-
you can have a full-time salary and still go to school and not have to work.
No,
nights.
there are others, the city sends city employees all the time ago, and then when we have nurse practitioners at the city that are sent to school, I asked for the same treatment. I would come work for the city, if they would let me go to law school, I got denied, but we do it for nurse practitioners, we do it for certain fields. The city does give people time off. We're required to take our own leave and we're required to make exchanges and paybacks, and we've never argued why the city does it for other people. It's just something we knew that's at the contract table, we can negotiate it, and if it's agreed on, it becomes a contractual right. And there's other positions.
I've never heard of that, Mr. Gonzalez, that they're allowed to, I know that most employees that do formal education, that they,
Well, then I misspoke and I apologize.
that they do it on their own
It's-
personal
it's-
time.
It's irrelevant to the discussion on the table. I just- that I didn't know if that the union agreed to the maintenance standards to be modified.
They haven't agreed to
And if that's the case, and like I
we
said, if that's
discussed
the
what the
case, I'll
intent
retract
was.
my
We-
whole
You
statement,
guys proposed something?
but
We had some.
Right,
questions
but
on
we
it.
just, we had a discussion about what the intent was, and the union had stated what they believed it meant, or what their understanding was. The city discussed its understanding, and based on those discussions, the city made the proposal.
and I'm not trying to change that, if that's the case, and the chair wants to go ahead with it, and I was just voicing the concern, because it was brought up during exchange,
I think,
policy
and I
agreements.
think it's important to discuss, because when we get a new contract, it's not always good practice to start a new contract with a grievance on the first day.
Right.
And so I think that it is extremely important that we discuss this and continue to have the discussions. They don't have to be at the collective, they don't all have to be at the collective bargaining table, but we would like to resolve this case before the signing of any new contract. So that there's a general understanding between both parties on those issues. Okay?
The discussion you said that we had on Article 32, you handed this over to us, right? And then you stated your definition of it. We understood you, but in no way did we.
Actually,
did we
before we did the proposal on one of the other bargaining days prior to that, there was some discussion about the maintenance of standard article. I brought it up. And I don't have the exact date, but there was some discussion on the table when we were talking about what new articles we were going to be presenting. So there was some discussion that happened before that session that we brought our proposal. And I know, we made the proposal based on, and I did it based on the discussion that was had at the table. And so it's still a pending proposal.
And just, what is the, you said you helped work on this, what is the concern as far as a payback, the one that you just stated, like taking 6
The
months?
concern is kicking the can way down the road.
Right, so something extreme like that.
I'm sorry?
So in an extreme case like that.
Yeah, in an extreme case, I mean, the way it's written now, there's always the possibility for an excuse. It's human nature for someone to be given an inch and then taking a
I
mile.
think it's just never
Right.
been done, right?
No, it's just the current policy just says it's narrowed the initial time I can pay back, and then it's even further narrowed when I can, if I change it.
It's narrower because there's less FTEs right now, and there's always that ability of, once we get over a certain threshold, then it goes back to the 120 days. But one of the biggest concerns was being able to, on an unlimited basis, agree to push that payback on and on and on.
Well, how does that
was the concern.
affect, or how are the FTEs affected with an exchange or payback?
It was just something from the chief as far as being able to make sure that, and it's body for body, it doesn't really affect operations like you said, but it sort of does when you have a firefighter who could potentially abuse that system, come back to duty and not be as effective as they were.
Right. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that
And maybe you
100%.
weren't affected by it, but it's, I know, as a law school graduate, right? They call it the practice of law. Why? Because you're continually learning and improving.
Right.
I would say it as an analogy, it's the same with y'all. Y'all are
I
learning
agree.
every day, getting better every day, and that is essential to making sure that your duties are at
About, right? Because if I make an exchange with Oscar, you know, if he owes me that day, I mean, chances are that, you know what, I'm gonna want that day pretty soon, right? So I mean, I'm gonna want him to pay me back, right? I'm not gonna go 2 years with, hey, Oscar, go and pay back, right? I wouldn't go that long. I don't think anybody would go that long without, hey, I need it for something specifically, right?
Also, the officers that, you know, for each station, you know, the officers in charge, I've had my captain ask me, hey, if you have any paybacks that have been more than 2-3 months, start taking. And they ask you, and it's not a, you know, I'm gonna write you up if you don't, they're just keep in mind, right? So as firefighters, we're grown men, we take care of our own, right? And if I have a payback, like you said, I'm gonna use it as good. So even when I make the exchange, I always ask the guy, do you need any days? Because I need a date. And then we automatically just put the pay.
It's just
Right.
under the current policy, you can tell your captain,
But-
hey, I'll take it when I'm good and ready.
Well, and
basically.
you don't get that because
Well,
most of the time our guys.
I don't think that one will be approved, but in
Because
theory, I
in
understand
theory,
what
he
you're
has
saying.
to approve it, you know.
As an officer, I'd be like,
Yeah.
you better.
Practically, no.
He still has to approve it, so if I give him that kind of abrasive attitude, he's not gonna approve any exchanges or paybacks for the rest of my career, or for as long as I'm under his
And
tenure.
It's a good point that Victor brings up. As an officer, the officers here, we have to approve it. I've had guys in my station exchange, and I've told them, hey, you've got several exchanges and paybacks, I know you better be making it back to work, or I'm gonna deny some of these, for the sole reason that you said. And that's the power granted in operations for our officers, it doesn't have to come from the fire chief. We're built through our chain of command and off the military, version of the military and how its chain of command works, so that the officers are checking this, because the fire chief is not even paying attention who's exchanging, it's at the lower level officer. And I know I've had this discussion with my men, I need you to come into work some days, you can't get so many days off, you come in a weekend, and it's for the same reason why I did it going through law school, I made sure I complied with the student handbook and how many hours I could work, but I also made sure I came in once every week so I could work. And so I could address my personnel, because I was a supervisor. So I 100% agree with the statement that you made earlier. I'm just saying the avenue to modify it is through the CBA, and I think it should be brought up here. That's addressing on why a grievance would be filed, because I guess there's a difference on opinion on what.
So then I
main
think
stands
based
there.
on that, the article that you cited that's the only article or provision that refers to exchanges and paybacks, correct?
Specifically mentioning
10.4.
exchanges paybacks. yes.
Right, that's the only one,
Specifically
and
mentioning.
yet we still have all our management rights, and I think it's Article 6, if whatever the management right article
Unless-
is.
Unless it's a.
Unless it's a
wages, hours,
contractual
conditions of-
provision, unless it's a contractual provision.
No, unless it's.
So a collective bargaining agreement does not leave it open-ended where, this is the time to discuss it. So now it's
We-
not our
What are the
proposal to
overtime?
make.
The duty hours? the
It's
overtime?
actually not our proposal to make. If you want to add that in it, it's actually the union's proposal to make, because you're asking the city to give up a management
Can
right.
I pause?
So, yes.
Charlie, you've been dealing with legal department and the chief, right? We were okay up to now, and then all of a sudden we get a surprise.
The reason,
We need to be talking to you, right? They need to be talking to you.
yes, ma'am, the reason.
All of a sudden we don't, what's going on?
The reason about it is that what was negotiated and talked about before was the memo and the policy of the outside employment.
But you were okay with it, were you not?
This is a complete new policy.
It came out with a new one.
Like I say, this,
You reviewed the policy.
The outside of
The out-
employment,
the
yes,
outside
and we
employment,
were in
yes.
agreement with that one. That one is fine.
that's what I'm
We're
saying,
not
those,
arguing.
and that's why I retracted my grievance, because that one was addressed and taken care of.
Now it's the memo having to deal.
And even the memo was taken care of exchange payback, referring to the outside employment. It was referring to the outside employment. This is the actual, he re-put that language into an SOP now.
There
So
was-
it's,
Yeah, there was an SOP.
It was
for
correct.
Outside
The issue was
employment,
corrected.
and those issues were
I guess my
corrected.
point is, why not talk to your chief?
it was really,
Like, it's just all gone crazy. It's something that's coming to the table, all are arguing about it. Why is it something that you can't communicate with him and say, let's work it out?
She asked about the grievance.
No, I know she asked.
Well,
Right,
no,
I
it was-
asked about
it was
and
just a
this is-
clarification, and
This
then
is
you
the
wanted
first
more
time,
answers.
yeah, this is
No, no,
the
but
first
you-
time that
you
we hear
mentioned
that.
about.
Yeah,
this.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Because it needs to go back to him. We
Yeah.
learned about it
Yes,
yesterday.
There's a common trend here.
It's
You
the
had
first
issues
time
with the
it happened.
SOP, with outside employment.
Mm.
You had issues with the memo. You addressed it with the chief and legal,
Mm.
and those things were taken care of. Now there's a new issue that you have a grievance with. Why is it not possible for us to have those same meaningful discussions?
No one said it
well,
was.
no, I
She
just
asked
simply
about it,
stated
and it was-
about the other ones, and we advised because of a new policy that came out,
Right,
where it kind of kicks back one of the grievances back, it reactivates under a different policy.
and that grievance, came out when, September 20,
No, the policy.
or the
The policy.
policy,
September 27th.
27th?
Yeah, the previous stuff was
So-
Or on
a
the
different policy and a different memo,
Right,
and
They were
those things
taken
got
care of.
Right.
corrected, and then a new policy came out.
but now we're here on October 6th, and this is the first time that we hear that there's an issue with that other policy.
Well, it just
Right.
came
It
out
just came out last week.
last week.
Okay, right, but we have we have ways of communicating, that's not a collective it becomes a collective bargaining issue because we're talking about an article that one article that we've already TA'd and a couple of others. But the grievance issue itself is something that you could already be communicating with the chief and the legal department, right?
I haven't been to work, I
Yeah.
wasn't at work last week, so when they released it, they sent me a picture of a one page, not referring to which policy, I'm like, well, we already hashed this out. So
Right.
when I got back to work, which was this week, when I saw the policy, I'm like, this is a completely different policy. That's where everybody like, yes, that's what we're talking about, it's a completely different policy. Like,
Right.
didn't you see, I'm like, I wasn't aware it was a new policy. I thought it was still addressing under the old policy, or the outside employment policy, which we already had talked about and agreed to. So like I say, the mirroring of the language from one issue where we had brought it up and have been corrected, it mirrors into another policy. We're circumventing the process of the grievance and what had been addressed and basically hashed out.
And I don't think anyone disagrees that that's the route to go to the fire chief,
Right.
go to legal.
But
It
and
was
that's
just
why I was
when you asked,
asking,
yeah,
and
it
I
was
was
just an update.
surprised.
It
I
was
was
an update.
surprised to hear because I thought, that's not something that we needed to wait until today to hear about,
Well, and it was
And,
just.
and it's something that we could have already been addressing, so
think
that
you-
maybe we could have had some more meaningful discussion about how to resolve this today. And I think that's what Ms. Cabello was referring to. And Joaquin. Okay, so obviously, we're gonna have to have continued discussions with that, and I please ask that you discuss this with the chief and the legal department, and follow even though you can follow the process, there's nothing that prevents you from communicating with them and trying to resolve it in an efficient manner, especially because we're trying to negotiate these contracts, and it does affect some TA'd articles that we already have in place, or that we've TA'd, rather. So we'll go ahead and I'll let the legal department and the chief take the lead in that, and I'll ask that you facilitate that conversation, because I guess they need a copy of the grievance to know exactly what the issues are. Other than Article 6.4 and 10.4, are there any other articles that are alleged to have been violated? And I'm not saying, I know that you know of right now.
Well, our opinion on 32.1 as well.
Okay.
Which we're still negotiating or debating.
Yes.
Right.
I was just.
Okay. Now, let's, the city has a couple of proposals to present and discuss. Here, this is Article 4, the recognition of negotiating authorities. Does everybody have a copy on my account? Do you have a copy on that? Joaquin? Do you have a copy?
Yes,
Before?
yes, we do.
Ms. Galea? So this is an article we've been discussing, Article 4. The union. Oh, and I apologize, the top should be that it responds to the union proposal, the last union proposal, which I believe was September 29th of 2022 at 1:39 PM. So it responds to the union counter proposal, not the City of Laredo proposal. But the union had proposed that Article 4 remain the same, that there be no change. We have discussed this at length on the table and asked that, especially because the city is subject to the grievance procedure. And a lot of us sitting here may not be here when an issue comes up with this article. And it is not clear, even though both parties agree on the intent, that it only has to do with the intergovernmental contracts that are negotiated that affect the firefighters and the services that they provide, whether it be fire, emergency, or otherwise, that is when the union will have an association representative to provide opinions and voice issues to the city's representative in the negotiations. And so we propose again that if, especially because of issues such as we've just discussed, that in order to prevent unnecessary grievances and to clearly outline in the contract the intention of 4.3, that we include the proposed language, which would be where the city elects to enter into an intergovernmental contract with the County of Webb or any other governmental entity or political subdivision of the state of Texas to provide services from the Laredo Fire Department, including but not limited to fire and/or emergency medical services. It will include one association representative who may provide opinions and voice issues to the city's designated negotiating representative in an advisory capacity only during the negotiation process. And I think that outlines exactly the intent of what this article is and what has been the interpretation of the intent of this article in the past. And so we just want to clarify that, and we ask that you consider that clarification. And one of the concerns here is you're going to ask, well, what's the concern? The concern here is that if somebody in the future says, an association representative says, oh, there's a intergovernmental contract on something completely different that doesn't even involve the fire department or any of the firefighters, that there's a grievance filed because this article says that they're to be included in any intergovernmental contract negotiations. So this is just, that is not the case. And that's not the intention of this provision, and we're just asking for clarification, for the clarification language to be included. Anybody else have anything?
I guess back when we did a counter proposal just to include to be able to comply with state government code on it.
Yeah, the city's already required to follow the government code, because otherwise it makes those contracts void.
I think they should, right, have to follow, but I think it hasn't been done in the past. I think it's, we just want to make sure that we're protected as far as, anytime any of our firefighters get injured when they're responding to calls that we're not supposed to be at specifically, right? I think we talked here at length at the table as far as having MOUs with different entities, and I think we weren't able to get a clear answer as far as if they were in place or not,
Right, and I think that the city had committed to looking into that and working to ensure that the proper MOUs were done. When you say that the city was not following the intergovernmental local contract laws or doing something, I'm not so sure that that's correct, but I think what you're referring to is when maybe there were some services provided to another entity that didn't have a contract or some sort of written contract in place, I think is what we discussed. And we went over the law, one of the last two sessions, there's actually an exception within the statute, and we read it on the record, and I'd be happy to look for it again, but there's an exception that where emergency or fire emergency services are being provided, that there wasn't a requirement for such written contract. There's an exception to that. So it's not that the city wasn't following the law, it was just the city was following the law. Maybe there wasn't a contract in place or an MOU, but the chief and the legal department have committed to looking at that issue. And if there is an entity that there's some services that are being exchanged, but there isn't something in writing, that they endeavor to get that in writing and solidified either in an MOU or whatever to address the liability issues that concern you. And from the city's perspective, anytime that the firefighters are on duty and at an assignment, they're always going to be covered for any injuries or liabilities that happen at that point by the city. Is that correct?
That is correct. We've never denied a claim. I'm not unless if you're familiar with one that has been denied.
Yeah. Is that something that we could get maybe in writing as far as, you know, anytime we're responding to any emergencies that firefighters will get covered?
We've never denied a claim.
The city has a workers' comp.
Well, and I think that went into like the whole workers' comp process, which is that, you know, there's a whole other process for that, and we can't contractually obligate the bypass of any processes
No, but-
that are in place.
I think the exception is for law enforcement, unless you have the statute.
She read it at the last time that was discussed.
And then the other issue is, it does mention some, I can't recite the exact wording, something like a emergency or like an elevated type of response. I don't know if, say, a nosebleed at UISD in Rio Bravo would meet that criteria, and that's what we're talking about, traveling outside the city limits for something that doesn't have an interlocal agreement, which the only issue is no one has an issue about going to the callers if the agreement states that basically who has the liability for it.
We have covered employees that have been in Austin under workers' comp. So we don't have an internal local agreement with Austin, but the employees are
Bless you.
in,
Bless
and
you.
we covered that injury.
I know that we can't contractually require workers' comp. For example, is the firefighter in Mission, Texas, the city of Mission still puts out wording, and even their briefs that they're in agreement, and private insurance company still denies it. And I understand the contract doesn't limit that. All we're asking was that those interlocal government agreements be in place, and if they're not in place, do we stop responding to those calls until they are in place, or what is the city's stance on the issue?
Well, that's what I mean, are you asking the city to stop, you know, if,
Or discussing, I'm not asking, I'm just discussing,
Right.
what is the stance? When I read it, it states it's for law enforcement, and those exceptions are for these
do you have
heightened
the,
triggers. I didn't. bring
do you
my
have the
notes
law?
over here. I've cited, you guys have the notes that I wrote down, the numbers? It's under, what chapter is it? I have it at home. 770, yeah, government code 771. Bring your laptop down. I'm gonna look this up real quick. And it's not an issue of going to the college, just so we're,
Yeah, as long as
the agreement states.
Right, and I think you're getting the commitment from the city that, you know, if you're going as part of your duty, I don't think there's a question about that. And I think so I'm not understanding what the concern is, because that's gonna be covered by the city if it's part through dispatch or your supervising officer saying, go to this call, right? So I don't think there's any question about
So
that.
if it's such an absolute, why would we put it in writing?
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Has there ever been an intergovernmental contract where the union has stepped in and said,
Not that I know of at this point, but my issue and the city's issue is that the way it's written doesn't read that. You know, the intention of that, if you read it, it doesn't limit it to things that the firefighters, the fire association would be interested in or would be affected by, right?
so what
So-
intergovernmental contract would come up to the city where they're afraid that the union would file a grievance?
Any other,
Can
Anything
I have
that-
an example?
I'm not familiar with all the intergovernmental contracts that
I'm-
we
I'm
have.
just
Say for
curious,
instance,
like
say
you
for
said.
instance, there's an exchange of water. There's a, you know, we're buying water from another entity. The
Okay.
city of Laredo is buying water from another entity, and it has nothing to do with fire or emergency services, will not affect the firefighters at all.
Okay,
And yet, the way that this contract provision is written currently, a future firefighter or a future association member will be like, you know what? I have a place, I have a voice there. I can go and provide advisory opinion, and I'm being denied.
On
then
vaccines,
followed-
as an example, we had one with the school districts, we have many others with, well, we had one with Webb County on the water, what's it called, that water, the bad water, the brackish water,
Black
for the golf
water?
course. The golf course.
Non-potable water?
Non-potable?
Yeah, well, not non-potable for the golf course.
But has there ever been the union, has ever come and said, you know, I want to file agreement, I can be there at that table and I can make changes and have a voice, and has there ever been an instance? I mean,
No,
because
and we've
I'm
said
just
that.
saying, for discussion's sake, most of the time, any issue that we do come up, that comes up with the city has to deal with.
But neither have any other entities or police department when it comes to maybe Texas, Department of Parks, when we have to negotiate something with them. Police doesn't come when it has to do something with that. I mean, we want to make sure that we have the freedom to be able to negotiate on the city's behalf.
And so far you have, I think, since what I read from Article 4 would be anything having to do with, when you're gonna outsource the fire department. That's when that's the only reason we're
We're
asking.
not
for that.
outsourcing the fire
Well,
department.
and the reason why this was come up, because at some point in our history, the fire department was outsourced to another entity. And we had nobody at the table when they did that. This was before, I guess, any of our time, the deal was
You were
done before.
responding to calls outside of the county.
Yes.
That's what you're doing.
Right,
Yes.
and this does not intend to change that. What
No,
it
no,
does is it
and I
clarifies the
understand that,
intention.
and
Mhm.
what I'm not arguing with what you're saying. What I'm saying is, if there's never been an instant where the union has stepped in and said, wait, you cannot make a contract with another entity to buy water because we're not at the table. Our union has never really done that.
Let me ask this, so then when, I think.
And
I
they were
remember
pertaining
that I
to
was
this.
part of the table, when the union said, we no longer want to make calls outside of city limits. What happens? The city stopped. Period.
And I understand that.
And so that was a moot issue, so we understand that we weren't going to do that.
I
Because
don't think,
it was all about, you wanted additional pay for going outside for different calls, was that not correct?
I think it was, we were short staffing.
You wanted additional pay, you wanted to get paid for those
Well, no,
calls outside.
Well, it started with the county was subcontracting the fire department, and we were going out there a lot, and taking out sometimes half of the department, and there was no backfilling, and basically we were bringing up the responsibility for us to respond within the city limits. There was points where we had half our ambulances and fire trucks outside in other cities or other areas in the county, and that was the issue. So when the negotiations came up, yeah, we did include, hey, well, it should be a separate stipend. That's, unless someone else is arguing it differently, that's not the concern. The only concern is under the local agreement where the exception, it states here what the exception is, right? And that's for, is not required in an emergency for the defense or safety of the civil population in cooperative efforts proposed by the governor or a situation which amount involved is less than $50,000, but it does require that interagency exchange that is exempt from the requirements of a written agreement or contract. The agencies involved shall document the exchange through informal letters of agreement and memorandum, which is the MOUs. And the main part of this, of having something in writing, is that what's required under the statute states the requirements must specify kind and amount of services or resources to provide it, the basis for computing reimbursable costs. That's not a concern. The maximum cost
Where are you reading from?
from the statute 771.004, government code.
Mhm.
And then the liability is, and then it's the other section, 772, I think. All we're concerned is if we're going to respond, it's something we put in writing and it states that the city will, exactly what you're saying right now, just what you're saying, Mr. Niente. The city's gonna cover the firemen. That's all we're asking for, is a written agreement that says, if we go outside the city limits and one of our guys gets hurt, the city's gonna do whatever they can from the seat that they have to support the firefighter. That's all. He was doing his duties. I don't think we're asking for anything other than a written document
So-
with any of these
I
agencies
understand your
stating that the
point
city
where
will cover the firemen.
you don't want the union to have a voice in anything else that the city does as far as with another entity, and I understand that. Has there been an instant, that's why I asked, has there been an instant where the union actually voiced their opinion when it was a dealing between the city and another entity, that not having to do with fire and emergency services?
And then my
or
question
anything else?
comes back, is there an incident where the city has not taken care of our employee or firefighter?
And I
or the
know, I
equipment.
know
We've never declined or coverage for our firefighters. We do take care of our firefighters above and beyond.
we agree, all we're stating is we want to comply with the statute so that it minimizes maybe workers' comp saying you didn't have an interlocal agreement, it didn't comply with the statute, you were outside your scope.
Has workers' comp ever denied on that?
Yes.
On that there
duties.
wasn't,
I don't know specifically outside the county,
No.
but even within the city, I got denied.
well, you got
because-
denied, but on your issue, not because there wasn't an interlocal agreement or not a
I understand,
memorandum,
and so-
right?
but you
So
can-
that's two different things.
I agree, but you can see what our concern is, or.
And you can
we
see where
can't-
our concern is too, because
Mhm.
what we're doing is what we're proposing is just to clarify the language and the provision that's already in there. And there's a reason that provision is in there,
Mhm.
so that you can voice that very opinion and the concern that you have at the negotiation table whenever there's either when there's an interlocal
Right,
agreement going
but
on,
The way
right?
the city's circumventing this is the city's not even entertaining.
I
to have an
don't
agreement.
believe that's fair to put it in those terms that it's
Well, we don't have one
circumventing
with
it.
UISD. Do we have an agreement with UISD?
So-
So why would I want to sit at the
I,
table
and I don't
for
know.
negotiations for basically something that's not even been proposed or being done or negotiated? All we're asking is that if we have something, a letter, or MOU,
Okay.
or an interim agreement,
Well, and in the counter proposal,
Right.
you said to leave it the same, so that's why I thought that we'd
Well, I
already taken
don't-
care of that
no,
issue.
No, we,
Our counter was to add the 4.4 language that was submitted September 15th. That was our counter.
I don't see it as an issue if it's gonna be done. All I'm asking is, in the meantime, are we still responding? And then this, because I don't know, no one has told us any different.
yeah,
We
we
don't
did,
have an intergovernmental
we
agreement.
did
Are we
submit
still
a no
responding?
changes.
Well, after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, after you guys said no to the 4.4, you said you were already doing it,
so
but you don't want to put it in writing.
We
You said
submitted
no
it.
to that, so then if we submitted, no change.
Right.
And the reason, that's one of the reasons why I asked, has there ever been an instance where the union stepped in and said, you can't, the city is not allowed to do, an intergovernmental agreement with another entity? That I don't, in my time, I've been here 23 years, I've never seen the,
Victor, and I don't have any information that would say yes.
No, and-
What I have is no.
I have never seen it.
Right,
You know what I mean?
and I don't believe that that's the case. The issue becomes that it is grievable and it is subject to the grievance procedure. And that the city would have to defend a grievance against something that the intention is well understood between the parties, but the words in the provision don't reflect that specifically reflect the intention, and that's all.
So, but the issue we're discussing, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a grievable issue. This is under the statute that we do not have an intergovernmental agreements, and yet we're still being asked to respond.
And that is being addressed by the chief and the legal department, that particular
But
item.
remember, with 791.006, it's, if there is a contract, then the governmental unit that would have been responsible for furnishing the services in the absence of a contract is responsible for any civil liability. So this is just a question of liability.
That's what we're asking.
We're already telling you, our HR director, the people here at this table are telling you that you're covered. So now, what's the inquiry? Are you covered?
Can
The
we-
answer is yes.
Can we have it in writing?
Yeah,
That's all.
saying.
Yeah, I mean.
The statute's already there. I don't know that we need to
You don't
have
to
that
put
in
the
writing.
contract, Because,
No, I understand. That's why we're asking, are we going to formulate intergovernmental
oh,
agreements?
yes, we're not doing them right now, but I'm working on them with Chief Hurd. Yeah, since the last time we had this conversation and you brought up this topic, we've been trying to work on getting MOUs
Okay.
with the various agencies, so all your concerns are being addressed, sir.
Right, no, and that's all I think we were bringing up. And so, the whole issue is for the record.
Mhm.
City stances, we are covered, we're sent by the city. And in the meantime, are we still responding, or are we going to wait till the interlocal agreements are in
You're
place?
still responding,
We'll
because
still
the
be
city of
responding.
Laredo
Is
is
committing
assuming
to
the
that.
liability for all the firefighters.
Okay.
So this would only be like, for instance, if you look at subsection, and just real quick.
On which,
791.006,
791.006.
okay? So if we were to enter into that MOU, okay? The government unit that would have been responsible for furnishing the services in the absence of the contract is responsible for any civil liability. This is just, this only becomes effect when there's a question of who's responsible.
Right.
The city of Laredo is telling you at the table, city management, HR, you're covered under the city of Laredo. They're sending you, it's in the scope of your duties, you're covered.
Okay.
Cool.
So in our proposal 915, we agreed to your language that you put in this recent proposal, the same language, and we added 4.4. What would be the problem with just adding 4.4?
Which was,
The city shall comply with the Texas Government Code. You're saying they already do it, so why not put it in there? What would be the problem with putting it in as an article on 4.4 and everybody gets what you want? You wanted the
Just done an A1, I remember this is where, so basically the city could contract, the liability would be, like, say, we get contracted out to Rio Bravo. The city could, in that interlocal agreement, say, but you have to cover the,
El Cenizo.
right, they would have to cover the liability. All we're asking is that these contracts always state that the city would cover us. So in the absence, if I'm clear.
So you're asking to contract something that you already have?
Well,
Because that's the thing, like.
if you
there's a-
formulate an interlocal agreement with El Cenizo,
Mhm.
the city of Laredo does not necessarily have to cover the liability. A1 allows that contract to state, if any of our individuals get hurt, you're gonna be on the hook for them, right?
and that provision allows you to bring all of that you're saying right now to the city representative during
Right.
the interlocal
Right.
government contract negotiations.
And the contract will allow us to voice our opinion, it doesn't necessarily have to be that.
Voice
We
your
can voice our
opinion
opinion,
in an
The city
advisory
can still
way,
say,
right?
point well taken, we're still going to contract this rate as per the 791.
Pretty much.
But the city is committing that if we're ever sent, the city will cover our liability.
Yes, sir.
That's why I asked, can we have that in writing?
You want that in writing.
So
That
that's
you-
how-
that you wouldn't negotiate liability off to the other entity.
So basically,
But
in
so-
the absence of, the city of Laredo would be.
What you're asking is you're asking to add more obligation, more of an obligation to the city onto this contract provision than what the law already says. So right, is that what you're asking?
In essence, yeah, well, that's the stance that the city is taking.
So our proposal is not to change that, it was to clarify a provision that's already here.
And what our counter was to follow the statute and what the city stance is.
And when you're saying follow the statute, that it becomes a concern, because does that, in your mind, does that impose additional obligations on the city
And-
that are not necessarily already included in this
Right.
provision?
And so the issue here is, I agree, I guess we're asking the city to cover more obligation. The city stance, though, has been repeated here multiple times, that if we ever send you, we are going to cover our firemen. All we're asking is that be put in writing. And it indirectly, yes, it does add more obligation to the city, I guess.
So,
That's-
okay,
That's the
Can we
discussion.
talk about, I have a question.
And so it comes up in the absence of it. It's not clear if there still has to be an MOU, there still has to be certain things. It's primarily for law enforcement. So these nosebleeds or headaches at UASD and Rio Bravo, will that meet the criteria to be covered under the exception? Is what we're-
And that's not a no or yes answer, simply because if the employee has a pre-existing condition and they try to attribute it to that, so TMO will take a look at all of that, so it's not a yes
Well,
or no
I
answer.
understand what TMO
So,
is.
right, so, I mean, we can't say yes for sure, and then you get a nosebleed at the school district in El Cenizo. So it has to be looked at in the full content of the issue. And I think, I don't
On a
want to get tied
case-by-case
into, yeah,
basis.
I don't want to
Yeah,
get tied
well, we know
into
what
saying
TMO
yes,
is.
and then it gives a leeway to following grievances. Well, you said you're gonna cover us, but you had a pre-existing condition, you have a heart condition, you're obese, you're diabetic, and then you want us to cover it, and you're saying that you're out there. So we have to take a look at the entire incident before we can give you a straightforward answer.
I think the processes are already there. I don't understand why you need it in writing if there hasn't been an issue with that.
So as we're discussing it, the reason for us proposing this article back then was for that sole reason. The concern was never, oh, we're gonna go out there, there's always, we're being shortchanged here in the city, and all those issues. And as we're doing it, all we asked was.
Shortchange.
Yeah, David,
Oh.
we've never shortchanged you.
Let me rephrase. The staffing was taken outside of the city and sent to the county for pennies on the dollar. And we were asking, hey, we're leaving the citizens vulnerable. I lived in the south, my family lived in the south. And we would take all the units out of the south and we would go to the county. This has nothing to do with what we're discussing here, but that's why this article was proposed. So that the city, we were trying to get backfilling. Hey, if you're gonna send this out for days at a time in the county, you might wanna fill in and hire some firemen to respond to the city of Laredo. Because we leave the entire south or areas of the city without ambulances or fire trucks. I remember because I proposed the wording.
I just, well, I'm just gonna say something, that we're going back and we're making a statement that we left parts of the city unprotected. There was a chief back there that is making sure that everybody's protected.
Okay.
So I just kinda wanna jump in there, David.
I agree, you're right, the chief did everything
Yeah, yeah,
and
so-
he's supposed to in the contract. All we're asking for is on the liability. The city stands, well. it's
So you're
not-
asking for more now?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
We'll use your wording. We just want to know what the city stance was, because now it's not that anymore. The city stance was, we're gonna cover our firemen if they go, and the liability be on us. All we were asking is if we do get sent out to these areas, that the liability stay on the city in that intergovernmental agreement, in the interlocal agreement.
And that's why you can
That's
voice
yes.
that opinion during those negotiations.
Yes, but you don't have to. The city doesn't have to. The city can still say, no, we'll let El Cenizo handle the liability for the firefighter.
Oh, so you're asking for.
If the city
union to
sends us, that the
now-
city takes the liability, yes, that's what we're asking. That's all we've been ever asking from the beginning.
Oh, are you
I haven't
talking
seen
about
that in a proposal.
Segregation, is that-
Yeah, you're right. Well, I guess you can write, we'll write one up.
See what the proposal said. Okay,
Wow.
and
I guess we can follow the-
they had proposed a no change, so,
Okay, well,
okay.
just for clarification, if you don't want to discuss the issue on another issue, you want to just let me know and I won't discuss it. It's just, you'll
It's up to
make,
the-
you'll
it's
make,
up to the
my-
president, it's up to the lead.
Mr. President.
Well, the thing is that you're proposing a change. When we counter propose, we propose a change and you went back to your original statement. So if there's never been an issue on either side, you're coming back to redefining 4.3 because.
We're not redefining 4.3, that's been the whole thing. You're redefining it when you're adding, the city of Laredo shall comply with the Texas Government Code pursuant to intergovernmental relations. But there's different sections of the government code that deal with intergovernmental relations that creates a whole scope of things. I think the city is obligated to follow those rules. Otherwise, there's remedies within the statutes themselves for violations of things like that. So we're already obligated by statute. What we're doing here is we're not proposing to add or take away anything from 4.3. We're just seeking to clarify exactly what the intent was, because everybody understood the intent, but the words were very general, that didn't limit it to something that affected the firefighters, which was what the intention was. And that's all we're doing. We're not trying to redefine it in any way whatsoever. And that's what our issue is. And so we have provided clarifying language in Article 4 and it keeps it the same, but it prevents unnecessary grievances, because grievances take time from both the union and the city, and it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time, and we don't want to be defending a claim where we can already resolve it right here by just clarifying language. And instead of having an arbitrator tell us something that we both didn't even contemplate.
I think no one has an issue with that. I think the union did propose language under another article for liability, basically under our duties. And as this was discussed, it kind of branched into that. So that's probably why there was no initial proposal under this article, but as the discussion took place, it stirred that conversation. And maybe this would be a better place where to address that liability. And all that's being asked is to be put in writing what the city's initial stance was, that the firemen will be covered up to the
Where-
granting of.
What article was the
What article did you
proposal
propose, Oscar, on?
for the
workers' comp?
liability?
Under duties, was it Article 8? Under Article 8, you proposed an article that mentioned it? So the union's,
8.5, just so
the
you know.
union was attempting to introduce wording to address this certain issue, but as we discussed this issue, it seems more tailored to provide that specific issue under the intergovernmental or local agreement portion of the contract.
The 66.
No, it was this one, orders of directive.
Article 8.
Well, I know Oscar had mentioned a concern with it, so
Okay,
I'm just saying
well-
that the reasoning is not that it's an amendment to that, or just a new proposal of that article, it's in the spirit of what the association was trying to accomplish. And maybe it was just that specific issue proposed under.
It connects to fire.
Well,
Orders and directives. Yeah, orders and directives.
okay, so, so that's actually, the next article that we'll be talking about, but just so that you know, again, from the city's perspective,
We'll counter, I guess, number 4, man.
okay,
We'll counter, come back to the table, we can move on, and if you wanna move on to the next.
okay.
I guess, just to reiterate, Ms. Roxy, is that we're trying to find the same ground, but it's just, I don't know, like, you're.
I know, the problem is with the same ground, it seems that there's, I think that we're both in agreement with what that provision means on Article 4, with regard to the intergovernmental, agreements.
And,
But I think there's also some part, there's an interjection of additional obligations.
well, obligations that the city already says they're already have enforced, right? You make it seem as if we're asking the city, do they have to? No, all we're asking is that you already said that the liability falls on the city. Just, like I said, put it in writing, or, but like, we'll come back with a proposal and, we'll, something else, right? But
So if you look at that statute again, 791.006.
I'll write it down.
It's 791.006.
Okay.
Okay, you look
No,
at
and you mentioned it already, and you read it out, and I understand that part,
But A1 mentions that you can contract away
And
that.
A also says if, so really it's a choice between both governments
Right.
to contract with one another. So now you're saying, City of Laredo, you have to say in writing that you're gonna cover. Doesn't that stop us from possibly entering into these interlocal agreements because you are saying that the City of Laredo must? What we're telling you is that even in the absence of these interlocal agreements, you are still covered.
So can we put that in writing?
We'll come up with a proposal.
So in the absence of an interlocal agreement, or if contracted away and the other is not, the other entity or whoever you contract with does not adequately provide that coverage, the city will step in?
Well, the problem with that is sometimes it's not even our decision.
Which.
It's at the TML, so now we're gonna be making a contractual obligation with TML, and we
And
don't
we
have,
can't.
we don't have the authority to do that.
Right.
And now, if TML doesn't cover, then you're saying, oh, we're grieving you, Laredo, because you didn't cover, like you said you would in your contract. That's the problem with putting it in writing.
So we
that
can
it's
set it
binding.
up, but we could set it up to where upon approval by workers' comp or whatever, whatever third party the city is contracting with.
That's all gonna be part of your proposal, and we'll look it over once you're done with it.
Sounds good.
Here's, Article 8 duties. Got it, okay, you have that, I think. For some reason, I'm missing one of those. No, but, oh, I have, there's 3, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Let's see.
Medical share.
So what we're proposing, let me look at the history of this one.
It was on September 15th,
Yes.
and then we countered that evening.
That evening, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
5
at 3
o'clock.
yeah, I have 3 it's titled 3
Oh, we
PM, but I
started at
think it was
3.
like 5 o'clock, yeah. So, we have proposed, we've agreed to 8.3, which is the duties of assistant driver include, and we'll change it to 60 shifts. On the liability part, as we discussed on 8.5, we have agreed to include duties, orders, and directives so that it covers anything that the firefighters are asked to do through their duties, through orders or directives. And we have fixed on what the additional proposal that we're re-proposing is 8.1 because the duties are outlined in what, and I use the correct term now, I found the title, pursuant to the Laredo Fire Department policies and procedure manuals and as delegated to them by the superior officers. And this is where the duties are outlined for the Laredo firefighters. The Laredo Fire Department policies and procedures manual is what every firefighter has to follow and what they're employed under. It's available at every fire station. And the delegation by the superior officers is under that Laredo Fire Department policies and procedures manual. So this is what happens. This is where the duties come from. It doesn't change anything else with the rest of it. As it says, related to firefighting, fire prevention, rescue, emergency medical service, salvage, overhaul work, and maintenance of firefighting equipment, apparatus, buildings, and the fire station's ground, including cleaning and mowing or any other related work. Tire changes on vehicles other than automobiles, pickup trucks, vans, sport utility will not be included as a duty of firefighters. Employers shall provide the training and special equipment in accordance with Article 11.2 necessary to maintain all firefighting equipment, including all vehicles ready for duty status. However, if circumstances dictate the need for contracting for tire change service, the district chief responsible for his or her respective vehicles has the discretion to obtain such service. Painting and weed maintenance around fire hydrants will not be the duties of the firefighters. So this just outlines where the duties, where defined, other than what is specified here, where the job description and the duties are listed, and that would be in the Laredo Fire Department Policies and Procedure Manual. And that's what the superior officers have to follow as well.
Do you have any examples that what would, I guess, be under the policies and procedures manual that firefighters would have to do that aren't covered normally within the article already?
No, I don't have any specific examples. It just points the firefighter to where you find where those duties are provided for in the fire department. Because the Laredo Fire Department Policies and Procedures Manual, and I don't have the sections in front of me, has the job description for a firefighter, and I don't have it in front of me. I pulled it up and I lost it. Yeah, I don't remember how many different job descriptions it has, but that's where they're found. And it just makes it easy. Okay, well, where are the duties? Well, this is where you find them in the Laredo Fire Department Policies and Procedures Manual. And then what had already been negotiated was the duties would be related, all those categories, those are the duties. And I think those are the duties that remains the same. There's nothing that changes there. And I believe in the Laredo Fire Department Policies and Procedures Manual, the duties are very general. The job descriptions are pretty general as to what it is. So it goes in conjunction with the contract, with what has been negotiated already.
Okay, we'll look it over.
Okay. The next I have it's our proposal, I have it in a tentative agreement, as a proposed tentative agreement, but it's our counter proposal for Article 12, staffing of companies. This responds to the Union September 29th, 2020 proposal. Let me pull that up. And in that proposal, the only change was that the union had proposed was to say each additional unit or apparatus shall require additional full-time employee positions accordingly. This list is not all-inclusive and outline the numbers of full-time FTEs. The city is proposing to leave it the same because as it already says on Section E as currently written and that was agreed in the last contract already addresses this, subject to Article 6, rights of management. When any additional units and or companies are added under this article, the minimum full-time employee positions will be adjusted appropriately, and the city shall maintain the said number of positions. So the city, anytime that an additional unit or company has been added, the city has always in the budgetary process in preparing for that additional unit, not only budgets the costs and monies needed for the unit and the equipment, they have also always budgeted and added the minimum full-time FTEs that are needed to staff and properly staff that unit and or company. So we believe that it's already covered in this particular article. And the city has consistently done that. There's never been a unit that has been placed online that didn't have the minimum staffing required.
And I think that just further clarifies, I think that going back to, not to harp on a dead horse, right? Like Article 4, right? It's never been done, but we just want to clarify it. I think we're taking the same stance on that. It's always been done as far as the FTEs that are allotted for each additional unit that is added, right? But we just want to further clarify it. And like you said, it's already been done. I don't think it further adds anything into the contract and what it was already practiced.
So on the union's proposal, on the numbers for the unit apparatus and the required full-time employees, for instance, on the, let me look at one. So on the ladder truck, you used 15 FTEs.
Yes, ma'am.
And that was based on 5 FTEs for 3 shifts?
Yes.
So, and what's the minimum staffing for that? I know that the desired strength on a ladder truck would be 4 firefighters. What is the that's the desired, but with the minimum, what's the minimum?
Three.
3, okay. So this takes like 3 shifts times 5 FTEs. What are the extra 2 FTEs account for instance, like on that ladder truck?
I mean, it counts for vacations, sick leave, all the time, the injuries, the time.
It allows for those vacancies to be there and still maintain the minimum staffing that's required.
Maintain the 3.
Okay,
So, like I say, the current practice, even the state stated, it's a current of an activation of a new fire unit or fire apparatus is 15, and the activation of any new EMS unit, or not EMS unit, ambulance specifically, is 9. That's the current city practice, and what we're trying to do is just clarify that, what's already being done.
Okay,
And
but
then-
the,
Because-
but, and I
because-
think the, I think the deal here is that we already have, in section E, subject to Article 6, the rights of management, subject to that, which allows the management to be able to, manage the operations and the addition of these units. This already commits, and
No.
restricts those rights of management to, that the city shall maintain the minimum full-time employee positions that be adjusted appropriately.
Well, that's only in the event that they create a new engine or, a new unit is arised. Like you said, the fire chief already does it. That's our stance on it, just to put it in the contract.
For
Put it in
when, for
writing.
when there's a new chief, could be from out of the department with a new negotiating team, with a new city staff.
But how is that,
Then they
how is
might-
that different
they might
from
want
this,
more,
that
they
it
might want
shall,
less.
yeah, shall maintain the minimum full-time employee positions, or they shall be, adjusted accordingly?
That's where the, letter C comes in as a 407.
Yeah, that's
based
our
on the
earmark.
Units that we have already, so. This was to eliminate all overtime, and that's the reason we hire the extra people for those units, even though minimum staffing is 3. Someone can be on vacation, someone can be on sick leave, or the chief, like you said, or management rights, pulls them, and uses them at other capacities within the department. But like you're saying, the practice is already there. It's never not been done in recent times. We're just asking to put it in there.
But it's still gonna be done, it's still required to be done even without any change to letter E, right?
What would it hurt for it to be, like, how is it a liability to the city to add just, for the sake of discussion? Like, if we were to add what we asked, what we proposed on Article 12, to add the 3 per district. And 9 for ambulances, what would be the liability for the city there?
If it's already their current practice.
Well, currently, I guess it's a current practice.
Yeah.
But if we don't have enough money to hire all the positions, we could hire the minimum. And that is what is required.
Well, that's what
Or
we're
not
trying,
even
that's,
hire and just put up a new ambulance or fire truck.
But we can't do that because the contract says that if we
So
add a new
it'll-
ambulance,
it'll
we have to
try.
hire the
You will-
minimum,
You will try.
the minimum staffing. So
It says
minimum-
you'll try, it doesn't say
Right.
you have to.
Well, it does on
the-
E.
Yes.
well,
On E, it says that each addition, on the union's proposal, each additional unit apparatus shall require the additional full-time employee's position accordingly.
yes, we're
What E does,
referencing
what
to
he
C.
does is whatever you hire, that'll lock in those FTEs.
You lock in the minimum.
So if,
That's not-
if Jesus recommends, if say we have a fire chief that says, you know what, I think I can put in 2 ambulances with 3 new hires. I think I got some extra guys I can move around. E makes 407 turn to 410. What we're saying is that if you're gonna add a unit, you need to add these people so we can account for vacation. So let's just say a new fire station's added. 5 persons for the engine, 2 for the ambulance, right? That's 7. When you calculate just their vacations alone, that's 105 shifts for the whole year. For one of those individuals to be on vacations. The other individuals, like, what are they for? So that we don't have to hire overtime, so that we don't have the shift in manpower. So where now the city comes back and says, hey, we put in some ambulances and you guys are taking your accruals and now we're hiring overtime, and look at the expenses. What the proposal in the union is, if you're gonna hire for a new unit, you hire the appropriate staffing so that they can manage themselves. They fill in when people are on vacations, on sick leave, injury, whatever it may be, we have sufficient manpower. The city doesn't have to hire or implement a unit, but in the case it does, the city will hire those. Later on, the union doesn't get hit as well as, well, your units are understaffed, we don't have manpower. And so the FTE article, which is their C, makes sure that when someone is hired or a unit is put into play, that's not the case. You can propose, let's put another ambulance because Councilman X wants it. You know what, you have 6 firemen, fire chief, you know, I think I got 5, hire me one more and I can put the ambulance in. But we're depleting from everywhere else. And as long as you attempt, we'll bring out budgetary concerns and it might suffice, right? So that's what the union.
So what if the,
Just to reiterate, the question was, what is the impact? And I'm mentioning that the impact is right now, management kind of has to meet the 3. So right now, when you put a new ladder, we have to hire 12 positions no matter what. If sometimes we have enough money and say, you know what, let's hire 3 more or 2 more to get to the 15, because that's gonna help us on the leave issue. But once you put it in there, you don't have that flexibility, you know, that's something that the city would be giving up, and now you have to do that.
And that, the reason the union's
And
first
and that, I was
proposal
trying to
was.
answer the question,
Yeah.
so I hope that doesn't
Yeah,
get lost.
yeah, no, but the reason the union's proposal initially was all that manpower where you put like 51 firefighters was that on the safety side, it's better to have 4 men on a ladder truck than bring them down to 3 and then, you know, try to squeeze 3 more into another ladder truck. Because most of the time what our needs are manpower and not the extra $3 million truck. What we need sometimes is the manpower. So the union's initial proposal reflected, we need more manpower per unit, not necessarily just more units so we can comply with ISO ratings or to please a request for another ambulance. And that's why it kind of gets intermingled and it muddies the waters. But there's multiple concerns to the issues on why the association frequently requests more manpower per unit and wants to go down the line of that type of wording versus, well, we're just gonna hire the bare minimum that we think, because we understand, one, the financial issues and how those will be discussed, but secondly, the safety for the firemen that are on those units, we would like to see more firefighters per unit.
And it's not what we think, it's what's in the contract. The contract, at a minimum, has to have 3
Right.
increase. So
Right.
we're just saying right now, and I'm gonna repeat myself, the question is, what is the difference between what's being proposed to what we have? And you're saying it's past practice, there's no impact, you're already doing it. Yes, but we're losing that ability to be able to say,
I wanna do it now.
well, we don't have the resources or the money to do all these positions, but we need to open this fire station, and we need to buy this ladder truck, and we need to bring it online. So, you know, we're gonna make an effort to get as many. We know that we are behind on the FTEs because of the lease. You know, we're averaging 25, we understand that. But at the same time, we know that there's a new station coming up the line that's gonna require 30 new FTEs. So if I can save 2 or 3 here and reduce that 30 to 27, 26, the better we're gonna be able to afford that bill when it comes.
No, but you won't alleviate the 25 that are out per shift. You're
Right,
just
right.
only-
So,
You're only
but,
gonna
yes, but,
exaggerate
and if we
that
had
effect.
the resources, we would get the 25 plus the 30 right off the bat, and the overtime would go down
Even-
dramatically.
Understood.
Unfortunately,
Even then,
we
sir,
This
don't
is why
have-
the association
Whenever,
is
whenever
stating,
the fire chief does, like, give an example, he asked for a new fire station with a ladder truck and an engine. When he budgeted for the 30.
Right.
Right? So he's already asking the
Yes.
city for the 30. He's already doing what we're asking for him to put in.
Yes.
Well, and you're saying is,
If you put it in the
don't restrict
contract.
them? I mean.
No, what I'm saying, if you put it in the contract, you're locked into it.
Right.
And now you don't have any flexibility to try to make up when you have the money or you don't have the money, because, I mean, I'm looking at the budget moving forward.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look that good moving forward because of all the new demands that we're gonna have because we're a growing city. So that's the only thing, if we can save a little bit here and there, it's just gonna help us in the future be able to either provide more equipment, more manpower,
Right.
et cetera.
and I think
And-
on the concern side from the association, that's well noted, and we've always known that. It's more a safety issue of
And
wanting to require the adequate staffing for the union. And I'll go back to saying that the association would rather see more firefighters per truck than just a bunch of trucks, right?
so I think
Promotion wise,
I
every
think
fireman's
I
gonna
mean,
tell you, I'll
everybody-
take the promotion, but for safety reasons, for burnout, for ambulance rotations, or a lot of the articles, and if you start to look at the theme of some of the articles of why this is required, or requested and in the contract, is for the safety of the firefighter, for the well-being of the firefighter, for the mental issues, or the mental status of the firefighter. And that's why the association had made that request to begin with. And then I think that's why we're bringing it now. What's the cost right now if the last 2, 3 ambulances in the last station has all been hired at 15 and up. I mean, it's been a practice for the last decade or so. So that's what Rick did. So, I understand what your point is. I don't know what the president's gonna want to say.
I'm gonna say, going back to this being the current practice, the activation of new units is just a way to reiterate what he says. If you're constantly minimally staffing, that allows the city to grow and grow and grow. But it's gonna constantly short staff the cause what in reality, what we call as a skeleton crew. You're minimally staffing a unit to perform a certain duty when it's not actually fully staffed to the ability that it's supposed to be. Like I say, give that, well, now we're gonna start minimally staffing them. You're activating a lot of new units without actually growing the manpower. You're actually gonna affect the budget a lot more than what it's gonna help it. This is actually more towards maintaining control, that fully staffing of a unit, to be able to, absorb that loss, to be absorbed, in case of injury, illness, vacations, or reassignment to a different duty. Because as right now, as we stated in the original proposal, we asked for five on each training division and one, which is our coordinator. These are things that are already being staffed. We're being pulled from one pool, and we're able to absorb that. Why we're able to absorb that is because we're still falling into the 15 and 9 rule. If you start doing that and still be pulling from the line, you're gonna cause vacancies that are not gonna be replaced by anybody else at all. So if you have that 5 per shift, you reassign one, you still have 4 per shift. That allows for still somebody to be on sick leave, somebody to be on annual leave. With the ambulance and being at that same station where it allows that manning of an extra unit, so you be able to have more people missing and still fall within that minimum staffing where it's not gonna trigger overtime. So to be able to, I guess, better budget from here on to the future.
And also, I mean, right now, it's being done by attrition. You hire the 15 guys for the truck, the 9 guys for the ambulance, and then the attrition, we're down to 360, right, we're not at 407. So the budget savings has been there, and we still have that ability. We're just saying, add the FT number to our contract and hire the right amount at the beginning, and through attrition, I mean, the city does what it does, and it has done for, in my entire career, we've never been fully staffed. It's not a thing, because we just ask for it.
And the thing that why the unions request, it's more of a safety issue. NFPA, every national standard kind of states they want 4 firefighters per truck. It's again, the wear and tear on the firemen, the safety, mental health. And what Chapa just said, we know that it's less expensive for the city to hire overtime than to actually hire the firefighter full-time to man the truck, right? And that's what the request came from. One, the attempt was to increase manpower per unit for the safety reasons. Secondly, I understand the budget constraints on the city, but this is just in case a unit is added, that it would be initially staffed. Because you can hire the 15 and 9 and then have 6 individuals retire, and you still wouldn't have to hire because you haven't met the 10 firefighter threshold. So the city would still hold off on hiring because they're not gonna start an academy for 6 positions. So the other wording also assists the city in, if 8 firemen retired, if we hired instead of 15 to 9, those 6 retire and the 2 to the ambulance, you still didn't have to hire anyone. That's why the city wanted the 10 firefighter threshold. Once we go over 10, then you would start the process, and another 1.5 years, the academy would get started. So there is that savings to the city there.
But I think the way that E is written overcomes that 10 full-time.
No,
That
the way
10
E is written is
threshold.
that when an additional unit is added, the minimum, the FTE positions will be adjusted appropriately.
Yeah, and then it goes on,
So if you
the
hire
added
9
language though says each additional unit apparatus shall require additional full-time employee positions accordingly, and then it lists all the FTEs, which is more than the minimum.
Oh, the initial proposal.
The union's proposal.
Yes, the initial or counter?
The unions, the union's proposal from 9/29/22.
That's
Yeah.
just when you hire, that would be the model to follow, not that
Just
you're.
to hire, not,
Yeah.
not to maintain.
Basically to reflect letter C to be adjusting that number.
So we would adjust, say you hired a fire truck, person for fire truck, 15, 407 would go to 422.
Right,
And if people have retired and you haven't met the 10 firefighter threshold, then you still don't hire, but our FTE count is 422 now, so once you go under 10, you would hire to get back to that number. That's the 15 and 9 and 3 are when you're going to activate the unit and hire, and maybe we can clear the wording, clarify that, clear up the wording, but it's at the time of hiring for the new unit. That makes some clarity. I don't think the wording
No,
is
the
to
wording,
maintain.
the wording doesn't say to maintain, it just says,
Yeah, and even then, from our initial proposal, we, put it back to where it was desired strength, endeavor. It's not holding the city to where you need to staff it with 15 every day, 5 every day. Just, it's the modification, it's the adjustment of the FTEs as you activate new units, where that number grows along with it. Instead of trying to activate new units on the same number, we're at 407,
Right.
because there's a surplus of, hey, you know what, this shift has an extra 3 guys, we can squeeze another ambulance in there.
so, and I think from the city's perspective, and Jesus, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the numbers that are provided are not based on the minimum. The city does what it can when it has the money and the resources to do it, to add the
Above and beyond.
above and beyond the minimum. But what this does is it takes away the city's ability to be able to work with its budget and get a unit in place, because if the city doesn't have the resources to staff an engine and hire pursuant to the union's proposal, a required 15 FTEs for one engine, but they only have money for the minimum, then it prevents that unit from going into service.
I mean, what it
Well,
does-
the way that it's
what it-
proposed
What it
would.
does is adjust that staffing level, because again, our protection towards it, or the liability to it, is the addition of more units and more units and more units without adjusting the FTEs as being done.
We are adjusting right now.
That's what I'm saying. It's a current practice. It's just basically from here on out, fire chief changes, city administration changes, and they don't know what the process of it was.
Right, but the
But if they wanna add
minimum,
more, I mean,
Yeah,
we don't want
but
fire chief
this,
to come and say one unit is manned with 20% or
No, no,
25%.
but the whole thing here with the wording on the contract, as we've done it, as we've been able to do it, is that if we're not able to do it in the future, like Rex is saying, we're short, we can't get the 15, because it's gonna normally be a ladder in an ambulance.
So why would you be activating a new unit if you can't hire personnel for it?
we can hire the minimum, say we have the resources to hire the minimum, the
And our,
3
and our, and our,
You
and our
can hire- You
FTEs,
can hire 12, not 15.
or
okay.
12, not
And our,
So we
but our
can't do the- I mean,
FTEs,
three units is 300, it's close to 300,000.
yes, but what I'm back
So if
to,
I'm short 300 and
If-
I have 60, because you normally have versus 60, 30.
Mhm.
So if I'm short $500,000, then what do? I don't have the flexibility now to at least get the 3 right now that I can, and then when I can't, I can go to 4 or 5. Because, and hopefully, as we move forward, we get grants and we get another 15, 20, now I have a backup to hire more equipment. The other thing that I kind of mentioned, Roxy, is that we throw in the 407 with what's in the units, but the 407 is the total FTEs, which is suppression and administration.
Mhm.
And right now, what the chief is having to do is pull people from the line, from the administration.
throughout the history of the department has been doing
Right,
that.
to make sure that there's the safety issue on the engine truck, of the engines is 3, you have to have 3. So, he works with those numbers for one, but if we look at only what is needed by the units, it's a lesser number. And that's a number we were using to kind of figure out, do we have enough personnel in the 407 to do the 4-man crews? And we said, well, no, we're short, we have to hire 30, 40, whatever number we're looking at that point. So, but But coming back to the question. there
Well,
is that-
actually going back to that, currently that's the reason we asked for the roster. Besides 2 specific units and maybe an individual one because of a retiree or anything. On our roster, it states already 4 people there.
On the roster, but the roster never has, it's always shorted. When roster is one thing and manpower that you have physically there is 2 things.
Mhm.
So even though the roster shows it, when you're there, you're 25 people short on shift.
Mhm.
So that's why, yes, the roster shows it, but you don't have the manpower to do it.
Again, that's also why the stipulation was put in on the original proposal, not the one that we're putting out, that you're countering, was for the fully staffing to be recognized FTE wise of our training divisions and every other required position that we need. Right now, actually, depending on the way it's interpreted, the department right now is not in compliance with one of the units. That being the ARF unit, the crash unit. That requires
It's not in compliance?
no, it requires a 3 per shift and to have the coordinator. And that's in the emergency action, the emergency action plan that the airport holds. The department has gone away from it or has circumvented it by assigning one of the captains on one of the 3 units to be the coordinator. But the way it reads is supposed to be the 3 per shift with a coordinator. So that's actually entails 10 people. So this is why,
But
The
no, that's an
origin-
issue that needs to be addressed.
That's what I'm saying.
So that's, that's.
So that's what I'm
a different
saying.
issue that, I don't know about the.
But you're
compliance,
that's what I'm
but
saying, you're
it's
going,
something that we need
when I
to
say,
agree with the chief.
according to the way it's done, and that's why, to reflect on the 15-9 and 3, depending on the other units, why it's put into there. It's just a current practice to reflect it, to be able to adjust our FTEs, so the city can continue, if for whatever reason, you know what, hey, we need to activate another unit, but we can only staff 12 instead of 15. Our FTEs reflect the 15, where it kind of continues to, it continues to strive to fill those positions.
Where can I read about the coordinator? This is the first I hear.
It's on the emergency plan. Oh, he left actually right now.
Emergency plan, what emergency plan?
The one at the airport. I don't think so. I think we
So
have
is that
it.
only for art?
That's for, yes.
Okay, but you're asking for its entirety for the entire city, or for the entire,
No, I'm saying, I'm using that as an example. Where not everything is fully staffed, it's actually being taken from the personnel that
oh,
are.
okay, because I misunderstood what you were saying.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying in every area, this is what needs to happen. I
No,
misunderstood.
No, we're just using an example like our FTEs, like, we're trying to put the FTEs to grow within our units, but some of the other departments,
Are
there's an
reflected.
FTE that originally was there 30 years ago, we should only have 1 guy. But the department has grown so much, the city has grown so much, 1 person doesn't work anymore, the chief adds additional people. He pulls from that line where he hired those 5 guys, one of those is gonna go over here. I mean, that's what's being practiced, like, our overall structure is probably missing people because the city has grown, but that staffing level has never grown in those departments to staff it right. The only one that grows is on the engine.
And the reason for the 15 and the 9 is more for the safety of the firefighter. We'd rather see, instead of a new ambulance getting put online with minimum staffing, leave the extra individuals on the unit so they can rotate and go to the engine instead of just being on the
I
ambulance
completely agree
24/7.
about safety. I would like to see 2 police officers in every unit,
Right.
not happening.
Well, but in our case though, for crime prevention, I can see, okay, let's go 1 per unit, right? And you would want to see 2,
Like 1 to 2.
but 1 per unit, I
If
understand
that's
in
what
PD.
is required.
Yeah, and not to get into that. What we're saying though is that if we currently have 12 ambulances, instead of taking away a fireman from every ambulance or every fire truck that rotates on that ambulance to put a new one in service, for safety reasons, we would rather say, leave them there so that they can rotate off and it'll cut down on burnout. Because the ambulances are overwhelmed with calls, and we'd rather have like Oscar get off 1 shift to the engine and get slammed constantly 24/7 or every time he's working, which would cause a spike in leave, which would cause a spike in overtime. So when the hiring comes, if you're going to even entertain, this is why those numbers are being requested. So that we can have the staffing, so that we can rotate and, you know, we're saying, if in case we're at that point in the road and hire this, in this manner, for the safety reasons, for the firefighters' health.
When you
That's-
start
that's the
clamoring
reason why.
to say it must happen, I see another grievance coming if we don't have additional personnel. That's why we're so hesitant, because of the past practices of how you all work things out and say, oh, because it says it, well, it's for safety. No, no, no. You know, there's one time,
On
and then
which
there's
part
a
of the
grievance,
staffing?
and then there's a grievance, and then there's another grievance. It's like,
But on
we,
what, on the
it's like,
staffing?
we're,
On the
Well,
staffing?
and I think the concern here is that, you know, we're also looking at the safety of the community, and we're also taking into consideration the safety of the firefighters, and that's why there's the minimum, right? There's the
Right.
minimum staffing. So the concern that I see here is that the numbers that were proposed by the union, but the city already has under its management rights, the ability to adjust appropriately, and it says that the minimum full-time employee positions should be adjusted appropriately, meaning the city, this contract commits the city already to at least hire the minimum for any additional unit or company.
Right.
And that we shall maintain those additional FTEs, right?
Right.
So that's what the contract says now. That's what we have been following. The city has had the ability to be more generous with that and be able to hire above the minimum at this point, because they had the resources to do so.
Right.
So now with the way that the union is proposing to change that language, to put these numbers in here that are not based on the minimum, it ties the hands of the city, because what if we have the city has grown, the city has grown and we have a need for an additional unit. I'm just gonna say
Like
unit.
An ambulance?
Uh,
There's nothing that governs the city on ambulance.
There's a new station probably that's gonna be coming.
No, but an ambulance, there's nothing that forces you to implement an ambulance.
No,
The
if
fire
you're
truck, the
replacing,
CI
if
is
you're
already
replacing
able to
an
keep insurance
ambulance or
costs
not,
down.
but
You don't
more
really
than
have
likely,
to.
we have a station that's coming up, potentially two down the road.
Right, so, but if the
You
city
said you would wanna
grows,
hire at the bare minimum for both
I'm
stations.
not saying right now,
No,
because
if-
I don't know what the situation is gonna be
can I
tomorrow.
finish
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead,
where I
sorry.
was going, please?
Sure.
So I'm saying that the city is growing. The unit, your position's always gonna be, well, the city's growing, we need more units. The city recognizes that, and the city says, okay, we need a unit, whether it be a fire truck or an ambulance. But when the city makes that commitment to enhance the services to a growing city, they take into consideration the safety for the city and the firefighter, and the resources only allow for the unit. When we're looking at the unit, we have to look at the unit, the equipment, that required FTEs. And right now, we're at the minimum. If the city doesn't have the budget or the resources to do the minimum, then the city cannot get that unit in place. Because we have to have the, more than the minimum in order to pursuant to the contract. If we were to set something out with not, that's more than less than what is outlined in the contract, that would constitute an automatic grievance. And that's, I think that's where the city has the issue, because the city has always strives to do more, has had a proven record of doing more in staffing these things. But the provision right now is that it's a management right, and we can, and our requirement is that we staff at a minimal level. And so, number one, you don't want to have a chilling effect where it's going to prevent the city from looking to do more than the contract requires. And you don't want to hold the city's hand or tie the city's hands to be able to bring a unit that would be necessary and not be able to do it because we need, more FTEs. And the FTEs,
what-
the FTEs are,
What would be the reasoning necessary to add a unit if we don't have the staffing for
Or
it?
can-
You can't, I'm saying the
I don't-
minimum,
well,
the
I-
minimum, right? If you,
But it wouldn't work.
we're already
It would cause-
required
it would
to
cause
have the
shortages.
minimum.
It would
If you
cause
have an,
shortages.
if you have an overhire, if you have an overhire of an academy, and there's still,
If they're still, but those
Right.
overhires would count towards that under the E.
say that again?
Under letter E, if you had 4 overhires, you're like, hey, we only need to say an ambulance at 9, we only need to hire 5, because we have 4 overhires. E says, that's fine, use those 4, they're already here.
Right, but it would
You hire
use, the
5 more.
threshold would
But you're saying
be
if we had
higher
6
than what the
overhires,
minimum,
I could,
the
I could
minimum
put an
is.
ambulance in without hiring anyone. And that's what we're mentioning, the safety and health reasons. We wouldn't ask the city to hire, to bring in a new fire truck if we didn't have a staffing for it.
The
or an
city's not
ambulance.
saying that it would do that.
Well, and that's what I
But-
was
but
saying,
it's
we've
committing
never,
the
we've never
city-
even made that request to implement a station or anything like that. It's like, if you're gonna implement at this rate. Because what we would rather have is 4 or 5 firefighters on a fire truck than 3 and 3. Because it minimizes the individuals on scene, it minimizes those that show up for fires, it's a safety issue. And I'm just mentioning it as because why those numbers? We understand the accounting side and what the city stance would be, but I think the discussion is going on our end to the point where, well, why would you even consider a new fire truck or a new station if you're not gonna staff it appropriately? Because then that just puts the firemen at a handicap.
The numbers that were given those were given by the fire chief.
The chief gave you the numbers?
That's what he asked for every time he opens up a unit, that is exactly
Not
what
me,
he asked.
Oh,
And the fire chief will always ask for the,
Well,
you
I
know,
mean,
what
that's
he,
just- that's
we
why-
can
that's why I
give
had
it,
made
but
that
what
point, man.
what you commit the city to is different from, you know, the fire chief can request it, and sometimes the city can grant it. They have the resource to say yes. Now you're taking away the city's ability to say, well, we can't meet that just yet. Let's start off with the minimum and then have a scheduled plan to hire the additional 2.
I
But see,
I understand that, but
And the thing is, and I understand where that issue comes up, except for the fact that we don't have the ability to say, you know what, we're gonna activate a new unit, we're gonna hire the minimum. Because as throughout in history, is people retire almost on a yearly basis. Our academies are taking such a long time. So if you hire, you know what, we're only gonna budget, because all we can budget right now to activate a new unit is the minimum. By the time that unit is put into service and those people already graduate, we're already below the manpower. This includes a buffer, going back to the safety. The people are not being put on only 2 at a time, where there's actually a rotation in these medics of preventing any type of burnout. You're starting to see for sometimes when there's nobody out or very minimal out, where it's a 5-man engine company. A 5-man engine company can literally run a fire scene with their 2 and 2 and have their driver be on the outside. And it's a safer way of practicing, you know.
More
our
efficient
it's
environment
yeah.
also for the citizen.
If
So-
you look at the ambulances, if we have 12 ambulances and they average 12 calls a shift, no one on the ambulance would rather have 13 ambulances to go down to 11 calls a shift. They'd rather take the 12 and be able to rotate and go to the fire engine or the ladder truck. For health reasons, for mental reasons, no one would say, yeah, shrink my call volume by 1 call, just to have another ambulance, then, but bare minimum, I never have a rotation off the ambulance. I'd rather have a healthy rotation, where I'm learning the fire truck for longevity, the ladder truck, and I'm doing the ambulance, than rather opening up a bunch of stations. The only time any fireman would argue, yes, open fire trucks, would be, I'm stuck on a promotional list and a fire truck would be. But for safety reasons, for the ideal situation of what's the best interest of the fireman, new units or more units aren't the answer. And this is why this proposal, the initial proposal reflects that, and we're trying to get towards more of the health and safety side. But I understand the city's standpoint from the budgetary.
Do we have the average cost of a firefighter that we would, a new FTE? Did you have
Was
that?
it, you have to.
It's a lot more than hiring overtime.
Yes, but you have to hire 1 firefighter, 1 driver.
Assistant.
one
For a fire
assistant.
truck,
Yes.
captain, driver, assistant, and fire.
So
We have to
they're
promote
different
them.
levels,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
promoted,
promoted.
okay,
So, I mean, you can factor 100,000 to start off with and just
for each one, and then move up
Gonna
from
be
there,
total with benefits.
okay.
But the shortages also cause concern as we married a lot of the articles to
And
pension contributions, insurances for the retirees. So that's how come some of this language is there to hold those FTEs or attempt to hold, just because then you start to see other accounts. So for budgetary concerns, yeah, let me just hire 6 firefighters for an ambulance. if we're not gonna look at the overtime shortages and everything that's gonna trigger. And that'll be basically placed on something else. Oh, it's because you're on sick leave. Oh, it's because your firefighter's sick. If we're going into it, we knew those calculations were there. We hired.
We've never hired 6 ambulances before.
6 fire, well, and
We've never
20 years
done
ago we
that.
did.
No.
Yeah, it's que we don't hire,
Back in the day.
we don't hire.
We don't do
when
a
we
full
do-
accounting
one
for
thing is-
that.
Yeah, one thing is.
Oh, no. That's what we're saying, that these numbers are to reflect that. That's what Charlie was saying, that this is what we've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. That's what the union was saying, is follow that path. I'm just trying to clarify.
We'll counter.
Okay. So, the next question we have is, with regard to Article 30 retirement, the city has a proposal out, but we were, wanting information on what happened on the vote.
We don't have it, it's-
They're asking you guys a question, I mean.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What was the
What-
vote?
We wanted to hear an update on the retirement vote, the pension vote.
They went to runoff.
Okay, what were the numbers on the votes? Because there was plan, what was it, Plan 1 or Plan A?
Current plan.
Leave it, no, they leave it as is, was a 53 or 54?
52.
52. Like, oh, it's 150,
154?
154, and then plan
No,
2,
170.
171.
So some people voted for the no change,
Which
right?
was
Correct.
50, about 52, fine.
And then on the two plans that did have the changes, Plan 1 being the more aggressive change,
It was almost an even split, about 20 votes.
okay. And which one got the more votes?
Plan 2.
Plan 2, the not so, not as aggressive change, right? And what happens now between the two the two plans, the two,
We already met, the board already met, and we're having another election next week, 11, 12, and 13.
so a runoff between the two
Plan 1,
proposed
Plan 2.
changes.
But
Okay.
1% contribution from the
Did
farmer.
pass.
And I was gonna ask, what about the amendments? So,
They all passed.
They all passed.
okay, and the one amendment that passed was that every firefighter contribute an additional 1%?
Correct.
What was the second amendment?
You had to buy our,
The
and
third
that they have
amendment?
to be
Married for at least 1 year
or
prior
common
to,
law.
or common law prior to 1 year
Retirement.
retirement.
Okay, to be considered a dependent or subject
To
to,
Beneficiary.
be
A beneficiary.
of the pension itself.
okay. And that vote is next week?
Correct.
What days?
11, 12, 13 September.
And it has to be either one of the plans?
At this
Okay.
point, it's gonna be either one of the two.
So
As
at
long
this
as-
point-
As long as 50% of our membership shows up to vote, it'll be a binding vote, and it's 50 plus 1.
Okay,
50% plus 1.
and if 50% of the membership does not show up to vote, what happens then?
And the state statute says it's not a valid election.
And then nothing happens?
They rescheduled.
They have to
Nothing
reschedule.
changed? Oh, you rescheduled it?
But they're going on shift, so.
But yeah, it's kind of,
They're being brought in on shift.
We've had the biggest turnout this last meeting, because we asked fire chief to do the vote on shift.
Okay,
So, we missed about 40 guys.
and so at this point, it's basically either the plan that brings the amortization years to, one brings it to 25, and the other one brings it to 30.
Well, now with the 1% approval,
Uh-huh.
we'll bring it below 25,
Okay,
and the other one will be at 29.
29,
Yes.
okay. So Plan 1 will bring it below 25. And Plan 2 would bring it below 29,
To 29.
oh, to 29
That's after the membership already voting in the 1%.
with the 1%. So already with that vote, the plan is in a healthy, gets to a healthy place, right?
No, the expected rate of return is gonna cause it to go back. I guess for formula reasons, you could say for that point in time, but as we recalculate,
So we're,
it's gonna go back over there.
we're gonna have another, I guess, study presented to the pension board by next summer. And it would take into account, this horrible year and returns. So it could go, the status is gonna change.
Okay, so then, say that this year was horrible with regard to returns and the actuary comes back. The board of trustees has the obligation and authority to vote on changing, does the board of trustees have the obligation to vote on changing the benefits?
So we'll have to take into consideration, the actuary will make its recommendations, and they might say, well, even though this might have been a horrible year, last year was a very good year. So we'll let the experts determine the offset.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And then there's always the different accounting practices that they do.
Let me look at something really quickly. Okay, but if the actuarial study comes back and the board determines that something has to be done, then they would take this whole process over again, where they would make recommended changes to the benefits or eligibility requirements, and then it would fall under all the requirements of the statute, which would go to a vote, it has to be going to a vote.
Any changes go to a vote, the only thing the board can set unilaterally is the expected rate of return.
Okay.
In our plan, we have what we call a three-legged stool, so it's actuary, board, and the membership vote,
Okay.
or recommend.
I know that y'all just did this vote to change the benefits and eligibility requirements. When's the last time that the pension has done this? Change the benefits?
In 2017, they voted, and they implemented them in January 1st of 2019.
Okay, what, do you remember what those changes were?
I got rid of cherry picking was the main item.
Okay.
You guys remember it? We used to take
The last.
the best, what, 3 years of pay periods, based out of 8 years.
That's 36.
Papers in the last.
Yeah,
And also,
out
lower-
out of the last 8 years.
it also capped the agent.
Oh, yeah, we capped it at 93, 93%, our max payout. And now plan one brings it down to 90, the other plan brings it down to 87.6.
80% of average, the highest average. And when you say pay, sometimes you think base pay, the average of the high, the average of the highest.
Okay, and then, did you have any questions about Article 29 on the health insurance, the dependent fund?
I have it almost ironed out, some more details, I tried to call your office 2 days ago. But we can work that out
Okay,
pretty quick, and then I think we'll be ready to present tomorrow.
okay, and then, I think that y'all have, an article, proposal on Article 16 ad pay.
Yes.
I'm gonna go to, take a break.
You want to caucus real quick?
Do you have a copy of the TML agreement?
Can we caucus?
Restroom?
Yeah,
No?
can we caucus?
No.
Yep.
We'll caucus for 5 minutes, go to the restroom, and we'll present.
A copy.
All right, we're ready. 4:11 PM, October 6th. We're back from caucus, stated our proposal as a request by a city to begin talks on Article 16. The numbers that we had kind of been verbally proposing at the request of the city. It makes this article lengthy. This is another counter to, as requested by the city, because our original counter proposal to what the city's proposed on, I don't remember,
Nine,
9,
9,
9, 8? For the certification phase, Article 16. Like I say, last meeting, we had sat down, or we were sitting down and as requested to be able to change it, because our counter proposal to that was to leave as is with no changes. The city, and understanding the city's stance on it, to be able to kind of get under control or curtail the expense on the, and the simplicity of more, but, not simplicity, but to be able to accurately budget the percentage pays, to make it into a flat rate. We did say, we did put forward our concerns on this issue. And from, like I say, again, from your request to entertain the idea, like I say, it was, as it currently sits, it's 10%. As we were mentioning, is we would be looking at something like adding 5% on top of it throughout the different levels. And we came up with these numbers. And this reflects on Article 16.1, under letter D. All the certifications, the reason it's 1 through 7 is each certification carries a different percentage, and each rank carries basically all 3 certifications under the, in addition, the wage establishes the agreement, the employee shall pay premium per pay period for the successful completion of the following credited hours and degrees offered in the fire science divisions of Laredo College and/or from a college or university accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. And this reflects on the intermediate, advanced, and master certification for firefighters. Article 1 addresses firefighter, intermediate, advanced, and masters. Or number 2, assistant driver, intermediate, advanced, and masters. Number 3, driver, immediate, advanced, and masters. Number 4, captain, immediate, advanced, and masters. Number 5, immediate advanced, district chief, immediate advanced and masters. Number 6, deputy chief / marshal, or deputy / marshal, immediate certification, intermediate certification, advanced and masters. And number 7, assistant fire chief, immediate, intermediate certification, advanced, masters. Under letter E, the employer shall pay an additional $100 per pay period to all firefighters through the rank of captain with an associate's degree from a college or university accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools and/or or $150 per pay period to firefighters to the rank of captain with a bachelor's from a college or university accredited by Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. Letter F, district chiefs shall receive, that went to the flat pay. This will reflect their intermediate and
Associate's degree and or.
the associate's degree or bachelor's degree. Under 16.2. Additional, under letter A, additional pay, pay per period of certified licensed paramedic assigned to an ambulance rotation and certified licensed paramedic not assigned to an ambulance rotation is as follows. Number 1 reflects firefighter with a paramedic certification. Number 2, assistant driver with a paramedic certification. Number 3, driver with a paramedic certification. Number 4, captain with a paramedic certification. Number 5, district chief, paramedic certification. Number 6, deputy/marshal, paramedic certification. Number 7, assistant fire chief, paramedic certification. Letter B, certified,
That's already in the
okay,
contract.
sorry. Changes are under 16.3, this refers to the certified arson investigator/inspector. Under letter A, assignment per pay period is as follows. And listed 1 through 6 is firefighter, assistant driver, driver, captain, district chief, deputy fire marshal. Under 16.4, proposed change, the letter A, assigned per pay period is as follows. Number 1, firefighter, 2, assistant driver, 3, driver, 4, captain, 5, district chief. Number 16.5A, assigned certified aircraft firefighters shall receive $190 per pay period. 16.6, letter A, changes it to per pay period for firefighters assigned to hazmat unit. 16.7A, assigned to rescue team firefighters per pay period.
I guess kind of just to elaborate on this article, I know the city is kind of hard pressed on the 10% growing every year. Just I think in serving our members, I mean, we feel maybe 50 to 60% of our members would be okay with this kind of plan, because 10% has been a staple in this department in the EMS since its start, since the 80s.
Probably since the last 4 decades.
So I feel we've kind of had like small surveys with some of our members have gone around the stations and kind of explained the city's stance on this, and, you know, in good faith and trying to negotiate something that would please the city, especially be a long-term saving for the city, but wouldn't decrease benefits or pay for a firefighter. This is something we came up with.
So this reflects back to the, I guess, verbal proposal that was put at the last 2 meetings. The city requested to put it down on paper to, I guess, put numbers to it to be able to better see how it affects on the budgeting aspect of it.
And I know the city already, like Mr. Copeland explained, they're already paying about 17.5% when it comes to the incentives with the overtime already. So I think it's something that, you know, we've thrown back and forth, and it's something that, you know, as much as we would want to get rid of something, I think this is the one thing that our members have repeatedly said that they would not budge on, but like Mr. Delgado reiterated, it's something that we've been talking to them and trying to explain, you know, as far as the benefits of the city, to where, you know, their overtime, whenever they work overtime, this number will not grow, it will stay constant. And I think this is a number that they you know, like around 50 to 60% of the guys would feel comfortable enough to say that, you know what, we'd be willing to sign off on something like this.
Do you need, over 50% of your membership to vote to approve the contract? Is that right? Okay. And so overall, my understanding is what you did is you took what the 10% was added, took that amount, whatever, I guess, do you use an average, or how did you come up with the numbers to come up with the flat rate? And then I anticipate, we haven't crunched numbers to find out the exact percentage, but this would reflect basically, like if it was a 10% ad pay, it would reflect what a 15% ad pay would be, but just in a flat rate?
Exactly.
But more or less, yes. However, in the surveys that we did, to make it easier, we just kind of took specific numbers. I mean, it's more of a general figure,
Yeah.
but that was the initial, I guess, thought process behind it. But yeah, we kind of took those numbers and talked to our members, and that's how we got this final number itself.
Rounded it to a specific number that they were still comfortable with.
Was the 6 index cities used? I missed it, I stepped out for just a minute.
No.
Sorry, Richard?
Oh, the 6 index cities, were they used to get the numbers?
No.
No.
Oh, you did not use index cities?
No. This is just specific to the city of Laredo Fire Department. Because, I mean, as we mentioned before, or as the city has mentioned before, they say that we're the only ones that have an EMS percentage versus other cities have percentages and other types of incentive pays like longevity pay. But you guys wanted to control just specific to this incentive pay. So we try to do that. We try to fulfill the city's, demand or request for some kind of creative solution. And I think this can be it, but that would be up to both of us to agree on, right?
And these ad pays were initially or currently paid on a monthly basis, or was it
Per paper.
per pay period?
Yes.
Okay. And since it was a percentage, it would be whatever the percentage was per pay period.
Very constantly fluctuating depending on how many shifts you worked on that pay period. If you worked any overtime,
It would be a percentage of what you earned during that one pay
there was
period.
everything.
Okay, right, but during that one pay period,
Yes.
right?
During that one pay period.
Okay. And here, okay, I see it was pay period, but I see it said, like, for instance, the original language was like 6% of base salary per month, 8% base salary per month,
I mean,
10%
it would
per
still
month.
reflect per pay period, because
But it would-
6%
because it didn't matter.
of the month or the year.
It was
or-
percentage.
So divide by the 20.
Yeah.
You're gonna do it all the same.
So here, the flat rates, for instance, just starting with the firefighter with an intermediate certificate, $350, that would be per pay period.
Correct.
That's per pay period.
So then, and that would be 26 pay periods. Okay, and so that would be about, what, $9,000 on top of their base pay?
10,100.
Yeah, and
And it came up-
advanced
the amount- I'm
certificate.
sorry, was how?
Oh, I was just doing the first
Yeah,
one.
but how did we come up with that like fixed?
We came up with that fix. We started off with a formula, but in talking to our members, these are kind of the figures we came up with. There is no specific, I can't let you know the specific, I guess.
So if
way
we
we got
show
it, but-
you, what, there is only one other city who has a percentage, and we could show you that percentage. We can also show you what other cities are getting paid by these type of classifications. And do you know how far you are off from them?
And this is where, I guess you missed this part, you're out of the room. This is where I said, we know that as far as the EMS and some of these classifications, yes. However, the trade-off is, like in San Antonio and Austin, they have longevity pays that are percentage increases every 3-5 years, 5% raises, 3% raises to their base salary. And we don't. If you look at our longevity pay, it's pennies on the dollar compared to them. This is our uniqueness of Laredo versus them, but it still balances out. So I think it's unfair to say that we're the only ones that get these kind of incentives specifically like only, like we're the only ones that get percentages in general, right?
But your
I don't
basic is
think,
the highest in the state too.
I wouldn't go with the
Very,
highest in the
very,
state
very
too.
compared-
If you look
second
at, there's
highest?
other, there's other cities that are a lot higher than us. I've done the studies around the Dallas metropolitan area, Austin Fire as well, and they're only fire department. They're not EMS and fire.
So when you do comparisons like as such, you do a comparison similar to what your city is, population, demographics. So you do that, you don't go and look at affluent neighborhood,
I'm not
communities, of
looking at
course.
Dallas, I'm looking at cities that are specific within the 200 to 350,000 population.
And now, yeah,
Like Plano, for example, I think,
It's because you mentioned San Antonio and Dallas right now.
Lubbock, huh?
No,
You
you
mentioned
said
San Antonio.
Around Dallas
percentages.
metropolitan
As
area,
far as
because there's a lot of
cities
cities
getting
around Dallas.
the percentages.
Did you say Lubbock right now?
Lubbock was a similar, but they are not higher than us.
Yes, and yeah, they have the same amount of population, with a
They have
similar
more
budget.
stations.
They also have a lot larger department.
Yes, Plano,
Larger department.
Plano, Garland.
And what is their ad pay system?
I would have to bring up those notes.
Because that.
I know their ad pays are different. Some of them, those aren't even EMS and fire departments, they're just fire specifically.
Which one are you
And they
talking
still get
about?
pays.
Plano or.
Oh, Plano.
Garland,
I
do we know
can
what
give you
their,
more examples on that.
or
You
what their
want me to
city
send you
budgets are,
information?
what their city budgets are?
I did do that on one of them, but I can't tell you specifically right now. I wanna say their pay might be similar in one of them, and their budget was a lot lower too, their city budget, as far as revenue and general fund.
And when it comes to this proposal, there's a request from the city, right, for us to come with a creative idea to be able to, incentivize our members to be able to, negotiate away the percentages, right? Percentages have been in existence for around 40 years, right? So I think it's something that, was asked, and it's something that we came up with, I don't know if the city, is not happy with the
The
proposal,
1980s.
at the end of the day, it's something that was,
When they created the
requested.
paramedic class.
Did we cost what EMT would be?
Did y'all cost, do y'all know what what the cost is? Yeah, of the increase?
I
Would
think
look
it was
like-
a little shy of,
I'm not sure, I mean, we sent over the proposal
emailed
the
it
other
to you
day.
all.
We got it,
Just to be able to get
Yeah,
an update,
So-
if y'all needed to cost it out.
so we got it, and so this kind of costing is fairly tedious. We were trying to do it with what we had talked of, what was discussed at the table, but it's so tedious that we had to know numbers. So as soon as we got it yesterday, I think it was like at noon or somewhere like that, we started to work on it, and it took quite a bit of time to just cost out the first one on the, on the,
EMT.
was it the
Paramedic.
EMT? Okay, I thought it was the certifications.
No.
Okay, so Jesus costed out just the EMT ones for all the ranks, right?
Yes.
So the EMT one, and that would be, was it this one right here, the licensed paramedic?
Yes.
16.2. And just for that one, and he was trying to do it as accurately as possible, and he also was being conservative. And he's working up, but just with that one that we were able to complete in the first year, that alone would cost $1.6 million in new money, for that one. So that's a lot of money. And I don't know that we've done the calculations, but but I'm assuming that it's gonna be around 15% rather than 10% kind of an ad pay, right? Or around that neighborhood, 14-15%.
I couldn't give you a specific number, but I know we could start with 10%.
Okay. And where did you come up with or how did you come up with the additional pays on top of whatever would be over the 10%? What did you base that on? Just trying to get somebody to vote for a flat rate versus a percentage, or was there any other consideration on that? The adding the extra money?
That was the main consideration.
Yeah.
Let's just get the guys to accept it.
Was it, when you were doing your surveys or talking to the membership, did you talk to the membership about, accepting a flat rate pay equal to what the percentage would be right now without an increase?
They're aware of the proposal.
It was brought up, I mean, I guess the big issue was that they felt that,
It would be taking a pay cut.
that in the future it would be a pay cut immediately.
In the future?
Or,
No,
I mean,
immediately.
immediately, like this next year, it would be a pay cut.
I think overall, we were asking our members, right off the bat, they're already gonna put in 1% for the pension, right? Because it's been voted in, so I think they're already taking a pay cut as it is. So if we ask for something like that, on top of it, our members are gonna be taking drastic,
But how
money
can
off
you
the
take a
table
cut?
out of their cut.
How can you take a cut on something you don't have? Because basically what we're wanting to, I guess, being able to string down is the overtime, right?
Mhm.
And so overtime could be 2 hours, it could be 0, or it could be 10 hours in one pay period, or whatever. And so you don't know. And so you're saying take a cut to what? If you,
I mean, they know because we're short-staffed.
Yeah.
We're short-staffed, 40 people.
right, but right
like-
now, so let's say we are not, we fix all the wonderful
I
problems.
think
So are they
historically,
gonna argue about, okay, now I don't have overtime to make more money?
I think historically, the city has always, been short-staffed. I mean, there have been times where we have been at full strength,
And
but
yeah, well, because. of
there
the
has
overtime.
been times where they're always short-staffed, so I mean, we're
Yeah,
always gonna
because of
have
overtime.
firefighters working overtime, and if you automatically implement something like that, you automatically lose
Overtime you want to
money.
all we wanted is a new, all we wanted is the new ones.
Yeah,
It's
did,
like,
Well,
did you,
I mean,
did
We
you,
always,
Yes,
we
but-
mentioned that, and that was, I mean, we didn't even get close to
I was gonna say,
50% of-
did you survey them or talk to them about the city's proposal where all of their stuff remains the same? And then we would somehow restructure the ad pays to a flat rate pay rather than a percentage?
Yes, and that was, like we mentioned too,
Because they
the-
wouldn't get it, the current
the-
membership wouldn't have
would not be
any,
affected, it would be.
and I
Any
see
effect-
where
And
that's
it's not
coming
about the
from.
brotherhood, because brotherhood, I can provide other examples where you all make different decisions based on, the people that are retired and people that are not, regarding insurance. So it's not talk about brotherhood, it's talk about working together to say, the ones that are here will not be affected, any new one will know when they come in what they're expecting.
But I think overall, Ms. Maria, you've mentioned, right, I think you've used the example of brotherhood, that we always try to take care of each other, and it's the same way, I think most of the guys feel the same way, that they would not do anything that impacts some people versus the other people. Like we said, we try to work on something here that, it's gonna affect all of us.
So you're saying you're fighting for someone who's not even on board, who you don't even know?
I mean, most of
Because
the
that's what we're
parents
talking about.
currently in the department have sons and daughters that are interested in becoming firefighters. Like, why would they be in favor of lowering their pay, basically?
It's
Because
not
that's what
knowing
it's
the pay-
doing. That's what it's
not knowing the
doing.
pay, it's knowing what you're coming into with your eyes wide open, and you decide to do it or not do it.
But, I mean, if you came in and you see I don't know,
Your
everybody else
predecessors.
that was in there before you, you would come in with the feeling that, wow, that's pretty unfair, they didn't think about us. I mean, that we're encouraging the brotherhood, the membership to stay united and together. We felt that the city's proposal was very divisive, in that mentality that, oh, these older gentlemen, these older members weren't looking out for the
What are you
interest
doing
of the
in the-
long-term.
What are you
of the
doing right
department.
now in the pension plan? What are you doing? You're dividing the old and the new, right? The new guys wanna kick out the old guys.
I mean, I
so
wouldn't
they
say
can
that, I
retire.
wouldn't say
We
that.
don't
man.
wanna kick out anybody.
I think both
That is
plans,
exactly
both
what is
plans
happening
are
with
progress.
We do not wanna kick out
Plan
anybody.
1 and 2, that is exactly
We,
what's happening.
we need to make
No,
changes.
no, I guess, maybe Chapa wants to further explain it, but,
It's
on
right.
on the pension, we're not trying to divide, we're actually trying to combine the membership to keep them as a whole, to be able to be financially responsible.
We all know,
that's right. And so,
Like,
and
that's the
that's,
attempt of it, so to
I mean,
say that
and
we're
that's
sending
the-
them out,
This
like,
kind of
that's the
plan,
attempt here.
this kind of plan would be a long-term win for the city. I realized that
I-
at one point,
The problem is the expense. The expense is extremely, just for one of the ad pays in the very first year of the contract is $1.6 million. And we would have to maintain that over a 5-year
Get them in
contract
extra
with,
overtime. eliminates the
But-
overtime.
but-
And
Well-
that
that's
one
for
point six
Medicare?
is
Does
almost
this-
the
it
same amount that we're
eliminates
doing
the
for COLA in
overtime?
1 year.
Where does it say
Our cost was
that,
1.7.
But all the
Where-
rest of
where
them
does
are a
it-
lot less people in the
wait a minute,
bunch.
where does this
I didn't
eliminate
understand.
the overtime?
I'm saying the increase.
You,
Because
this
This is,
increase.
this is a
Anytime
flat
you
rate
had
per
overtime,
period.
this would never increase.
Yeah.
This would be,
A
stay the
flat rate,
same,
constant.
constant.
Right.
Versus the
okay.
overtime, I know you had mentioned, I think we had like 700,000 worth of ad pays in overtime, if I'm not mistaken. That would basically eliminate you having to project or having to go over budget or in overtime itself. I mean, it would just make overtime a less expensive result of understaffing. I guess.
Yeah, and to answer or to address a concern that you raised just a little while ago about why would a firefighter who has children or younger relatives that are looking to go to the department, why would they vote for something like that? It goes to the same thing that the pension is facing. It's financial responsibility and the sustainability of the system, right? And here, what the city is looking at is, okay, the cost alone for the ad pays was at the $6.6 million. And that was in the last year? In the last year. And it keeps going up because people promote in steps and we get new people, et cetera. So it goes, it's projected, I think.
Well, it doesn't actually go up because of that. Because if somebody's promoting up, the only way it's gonna add to it is the addition of new units. Because if I'm promoting up,
If it's a percentage and every
Well,
time that you get an
yes, but
increase.
it's,
For the individual, yes.
the city actually
Pay is
saves,
going up.
no, but the city actually saves money. Take, one of us, for example, if we promote up to captain, I'm replacing a captain that's been there for over 36 months.
Yes.
Was it the 3 year? So I'm getting paid, I would get paid, not that I'm gonna promote, but I would get paid at a lower rate than the one I'm replacing.
By $5,000.
But I'd be getting paid less.
It would have been.
I mean, it's gonna be made up.
Nominal amount.
But what I'm saying, it's not gonna add to, because I'm not creating another position for a captain. I'm just replacing somebody that's already left.
And I don't think we're,
36
talking- when we calculate the increase, we're not calculating as people are moving up, because you move up.
Oh, it's
you
'cause
take-
that's what,
I
I'm
think
just
what we're
saying.
saying is the more the base pay,
Mhm.
the more base pay with ad pays,
Mhm.
the more gross pay, the more ad pays.
Mhm.
So the bigger that gross pay is, the bigger the ad pay, because it's a percentage of your gross pay, which is regular hours and overtime hours and all the other type of hours that we have.
Mhm.
So that it will increase automatically as the pay goes up.
The way it currently is, yes.
I mean, that's what we're proposing, something that
Yeah,
long-term
that's something
would
like,
not increase. And I mean,
No, no,
I'm okay with that as someone that's gonna be here for another 20 years. I'm okay with that. If in X amount of years, I mean, it's saving the city, it's gonna save the city tenfold going forward. Because that's the argument that the city presented, that for the last 30 years, as our gross pay has gone up, you're saying the incentive pay has gone up, this would be the solution to that. I mean, yes, there is a financial toll now, but I mean, long-term, I think the city would come out winning at the end of it.
In 4 to 5 years, whenever this contract is done, these same people are gonna be arguing for more money amounts on these.
The
ad pays
incentives that were
because-
there,
because-
The
Sorry,
city,
sorry, the
the
incentives that were there
city
before
says no
have
to
not
ad
changed
pay
for 20
increases.
minutes.
I'm sorry?
the city
The last
says,
27 years, the city has said no to the ad pay increases.
Yeah.
Because they've always been percentages.
No,
No,
all of them.
You have
all
fixed
of them.
amounts, and those have never increased.
Because the biggest ones are the EMT and the master certification.
Yes, but you-
That's why.
City of Corpus Christi, ad pay, $35 a month for EMT, $35 a month. You're coming up with what, 475? City of San Antonio, $75 a month, up to 175, I guess it's depending on those categories you're talking about. 150 for McAllen, 150 to 250 depending on the class. Dallas, 200 to 400. Brownsville, 150 to 350 depending on the class. Fort Worth is 1.25%. Y'all are 10.
I mean, a lot of these cities, they're not capped at 2 incentives. You can get
No.
multiple,
And
you can
then
get
I'll-
6, 7 incentives.
And I'll show you their base pay
Just
for
let
grade.
you know.
I'll show you you're looking at Corpus, starting salary for a firefighter, 57,000, ours is 70.
For cadet?
Cadet,
For a cadet or
for
for?
43, no, for cadet is 43, ours is 57.
And in Fort Worth, we're the only jurisdiction where we saw percentages, there is a cap on the limitations on incentive pay. It's the higher dollar amount of either one education pay based on the highest level of degree received, so you can't you don't get for your associates, your bachelors, your masters, you get the highest dollar amount. Either bilingual skills, verbal, written or verbal, one EMT certification pay, and up to 3 specialized duty assignment pays.
Only 3.
Yeah, but
So it's about,
then you can go to the city of Austin and there's step increases in longevity pay of 5% every 3 years after 6, capping at 21 years. So you're talking about a 5% increase every 3 years you're in the department. I mean,
On top of incentive.
and those
on top of
fire,
that,
and
like
those
that's what I'm
fire,
saying, you can't.
and those
I mean-
firefighters still can't afford to live in Austin proper.
Yeah.
Because it's,
I would-
it's, no. Cost of living in Austin, Texas, you cannot compare it to Laredo, I'm sorry. You just
Like
can't.
I
Laredo's not
mean,
gonna.
the market has
Increase.
skyrocketed here in Laredo
It's
too. What's
skyrocketed.
to say it doesn't
It's-
become the
Well,
next?
but the whole point is,
Yeah.
and we understand that, you know, you can compare the paramedic pay, but, you know, each of those unions has made their concessions in their negotiations.
I agree with you.
And we can't, I mean, there was at one point we were negotiating here, and the Austin firefighters opted to take these massive lump sums of sick leave instead of a raise. I mean, so we get that. You know, the association brought forward that they wanted no change, our members wouldn't approve it. The city requested to try to come up with something. This is their first attempt. If there's a proposal on the table, I'm sure the city would.
A fair proposal.
And what I'm saying is that, you know, there was an attempt to talk to the members to see where to get them to move. To sit here and say, oh yeah, we just toss around numbers, if the members is not gonna vote for it, it's not gonna matter.
But I guess being
When-
very clear, it's not about the current members, it's about the future
Right,
firefighters coming in who have not even, that there's not even number to come in as far as the class is concerned,
right.
not even the
And
cadets.
so the issue with that is that what they were mentioning, and it's not the brother, like you said, you're in the pension, there's issues that go on all the time, and there's always groups against each other, and then every organization is gonna have their groups with their agendas. At the end of the day, though, it'd be impossible for us to go down the road in the future to be able to get things done and to come to a systemic approach of approving future contracts, pension contributions. The only reason we're able to, you were asking about the pension, the only reason we were able to reduce time after time benefits was because everyone was on the same playing field. We stopped the infighting between the firemen so that we could make more responsible decisions. And I don't know if you guys remember, but you were there. We put everyone on the same page, and then from there, we started to work our way backwards. Me and Chop have been there for over a decade working on this. We know what needed to be done, and which is why we're not arguing, because we're gonna getting benefit cuts. We knew that those firemen were retiring, the more money that we would ever see retired. But we knew it was a responsible thing to do. One thing we made a decision on not ever doing was creating that division again. So we've taught that to younger members as far as don't do that, because it would make it impossible for you to make moves if you needed to correct actions. And the pension is a perfect example of when we create division, in firemen, we would not be able to produce a vote that could move forward. So we would get stuck in a situation where even just the firemen couldn't agree. Now, asking the firemen something you would entertain to get out of the percentage pays so that we would all stay together, they mentioned amounts. Well, okay, well, let's see an increase here. They understand, they voted for a 1% decrease. And you're right, it's not a pay cut, but they are going to see less money in their pocket as soon as all this rolls out than before. And with inflation and things cost, this is one thing I told these guys. Like, you know that the proposals, the pension and the contract happening at the same time is going to result to less money in each fireman's pocket at the end of the day. So that's gonna make it almost impossible to approve any kind of contract if that's gonna be the end result. So the only thing that could be worked on was, okay, maybe increase that amount. Last year's overtime was 3.6 something million. If you didn't have the assignment pays in there, it's a cost of about $600,000 savings. If we're gonna see years like that, you'd have a 600,000, just 500,000 average savings on overtime alone. If it doesn't say that, I think that's kind of what they were talking about, that's what the city had said. We don't wanna pay that on overtime. So if you're saving $500,000 on overtime a year, in 3-4 years, it pays for the initial hit. To get the firemen to vote a certain way, the only thing we saw was an increase up front with the savings coming on the back end. Other than that, we could all sit here and tell you right now that there's no way a contract would pass. If removing incentive pays and creating this, it's just one of those where They clearly stated, look, we propose no changes because our members have already told us. The one meeting I said here, you got text right out of the gates. Don't even consider it. I do the math and it's not if we get a 1% raise, the increase on that 10% to me is not a big amount. I know it compounds over the years, but the reality is it's not a big amount. If we get a 1% raise or a 0.5% raise, my incentive pays don't increase by that much. So giving the firemen a little bit on the front end for massive reduction on the back
But
end.
David, it's not about you guys, it's about stopping the bleeding in the future. That's what we're doing.
Right.
We're
and
not,
that's-
we don't wanna affect what is currently happening with the membership now. We understand, and we don't want division either. But we need to stop, just like you're doing things like Roxy's saying, to the pension and needing to do things, that's what we need to do too. Because we see it growing and growing, we see $6 million of that pays, we see more, and we're gonna see it compounding with whatever else.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do too.
Well, and that's what we're saying, that if, and I'm just throwing numbers out, I don't know the exact
I mean,
numbers, I didn't work on this.
1.6
If the 6 million went to 7.5, 8 million the first year, but then it would start to come back down, and by the end of the contract, maybe it's equal. So the next contract at that point, those incentive pays are now locked in, and then you have savings on the overtime. We understand that eventually, yes, it's going to
We're gonna
base
outgrow it.
itself, and not to say that on the losing end, but the firemen will perceive it as we're on the losing end because now I'm taking less than I was before, or what the potential would be. But to get them to move out of it now, I can tell you, in my case, I wouldn't even dare to approach the membership as far as saying, you guys get to have this and these incoming firefighter will not. Someone's going to take offense and it's going to cause issues for us in the long run. I would advise these guys to not do that. But at the end of the day, if we move, we all move together. And to get the members to vote a certain way, that's kind of what they voiced. I would need to see something up front if you want me to move out. from
But it's
there.
good for you guys in the pension, but it's not good for us on the city side.
I,
right?
and
Can
Oscar
we-
mentioned it, in the long run,
Can
it's
we
good for the
move, can
city.
we move together in the other direction?
I mean, and even the last minute you were saying we haven't done anything, I kind of took offense, but I didn't say anything. Chapa and I, some of us have been working on reducing benefits and doing things, and if you guys aren't aware of that, and
Benefits,
maybe you
I'm
don't
sorry, David,
remember,
in the
on the
pension?
pension
No,
and
no, I'm
certain
aware of it,
issues.
I'm a pension board member.
Yeah, so, yeah, the last time you had made a comment, kind of like, oh, you guys are doing this. I've been proposing benefits to my, cuts to my benefits for over a decade now. We've worked on that. We understand the situation the city is in, so to kind of say that, throw it just loosely that we haven't been looking at it, I think it's a little bit reckless. But at the end of the day, we have been. And we understand, though, that it would take a vote from the membership for us to move. And if our membership is clearly already telling us, don't even bring us an idea that proposes this without certain aspects to it, we're just spending time, we're just wasting time, basically. Because they're not even going to entertain it. So at the end of the day, if the city wants to counter-propose or do something so that we can move the process forward, but we already know. The guys at my station, as soon as I went back, you guys are crazy. Like, they're just proposals, let us discuss, right? But that's what they're looking at. They're looking at the video. So it's kind of like, I know what the city is asking, but to a certain degree, what you're asking, it makes it almost impossible to pull off. Now, there's ways where enough members are saying, we might be able to entertain this, but if that's not there, then, I mean, you're lucky we would get a single-digit percentage vote.
Even some of the members with this proposal, why are we even entertaining the fact of giving up the beat?
So you said 1.6 for the paramedic pay? So,
In the first year.
EMT.
yeah, so you mentioned there was 6.6 of ad pay per year. So 1.6, and that's,
Oh, no, that's new money on top of the $6.6 million.
On the amount proposed.
And the EMT.
That's not total, that's 1.6 in additional new monies that the city would have to find and budget for in year ones.
I think
And
one,
So
carry it to five.
if we said, look, our members have clearly stated, they wouldn't move unless there was an increase. And the city's saying, and better yet, we're not going to divide the membership that way. And the city's saying, look, we have to move to a dollar amount. Is the city even considering an increase on a dollar amount to get out of the percentages? Because if not, then the whole exercise is
A wash,
Is considering what?
futile.
No, no,
Uh,
considering amount.
If you are not even considering increasing anything on the incentive pays, if we switch from a percentage to a dollar amount,
Oh, okay.
if you're not even considering that, then there's nothing, and you mentioned it earlier, what are our members getting? They're going to perceive that as nothing, and there's no way they're gonna vote for it. We've already been told, don't even touch it. But we're trying to get that discussion going. But if the city's not even proposing or considering it, then it'd be good to know, because then that way these guys aren't going around asking the members a bunch of things that aren't even gonna happen anyway.
But sometimes it's not about what the membership wants, it's about what the city can afford. They're the
I
ones-
understand,
they're the ones with the
but
purse,
there's
you
the
know?
ones that are gonna, what I'm saying is to get to a contract approved by the members.
But it's, I mean,
you get for the city. it's
Oh, I
the
get
same
it.
thing, the
I
city
understand.
won't-
I understand.
and I get what you're saying, I mean, dividing the membership, but it seems to me like the brotherhood can be fractured just by, when it comes down to the numbers and cents.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And,
The,
and I
the,
mean,
the
it's
issue
not-
is for the future, to get any consensus of a majority to approve something. If we have all these, differentiations, I struggle with that word so much. So many differences, it makes it very hard enough for us to function. We saw it in the pension system. We could not get anything done, even though we knew we were headed down the wrong road, until we put everyone on the same page. Once we put everyone on the same page, and you kind of stop the infighting, then we were able to pull back some of those benefits and those needs that we needed to do. If not, it would have been impossible to pull off. And then, it happened in stages, and we understood it, and you had older firemen that had grown up under one system with new firemen. And all we're saying is that if we go down that road again, we won't even entertain it, because we understand where we came from and what it cost and what it would cause in the future. It would be chaotic for the future members.
I mean, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but y'all came together on the pension issue because it was in a dire situation, correct? And so what's to say that this like, let's say for whatever reason, the city of Laredo were to fall into some financial crisis, but we are contractually obligated to pay these, quite large amounts. Who's to say that these firefighters won't come together again for a common purpose? It just, to say that it's impossible, I just think is a.
Well, no, and that argument has been, we've been introduced before, past city managers, and then every single time we've asked to sit down or they've asked us to sit down to consider these things, we've asked every city manager, there's been at least two that we've asked. You show us those dire straits that you're talking about, and by all means, we are all open to opening the contract and doing something about it. Every single time, they're like, it's not that bad, we'll see what happens. But we've been willing. I sat with Carlos Villarreal, I sat with, I don't know who the one after him was, and he told us the same thing over and over. Well, the city's not gonna be able to pay. Look, sir, as long as you show me so that I can show my members, we're more than willing. There was one point, Carlos Villarreal wanted us to forego our raises for 6 months so that he could give city employees a raise. We told him, look, sir, if that's what it's going to take and there's no other way, we're all in. He said, never mind, we have enough to give him the raise, and it ended there. So I've sat there with these city managers when these conversations have happened. Every single time, they'll be like, no, we just wanted to see what you would answer. And we've done, we're more than willing to work. We've explained this contract after contract. We will take the punches with the city as it comes, but we will also want to be there for the winnings, right? And if that's the case, I have no doubt our members, to protect one another, be like, hey, instead of getting rid of 50 firemen, would you forego this raise or do something like that? I have no doubt our members would make that vote happen. But we're not there. We're at this situation. I understand there's only X amount of dollars and there's only one pie, and how are you gonna cut it, and whether you wanna give a slice or not. All we're saying is, what you're asking on this article, this is the only way that these guys have gotten together to see that would be able to possibly move it forward and getting a vote that would approve the contract. And that's why I'm asking, is the city even considering an increase on a dollar amount? Because if not, the exercise is just not productive, and nothing's going to come of it.
And I have to caucus with my team
Right,
to
right,
answer.
and that's
So-
why I'm asking,
So, yeah,
that's why
but
I'm
yeah,
asking.
that's it,
Because
yeah,
instead of
we
just-
understand?
We're just
We
passing
understand.
out the information in
Sure.
a sense, that we see the problems down the road.
Yeah, like I said, long-term for myself, I will see the savings for the city versus some people that are at the end of the road. I'm fine with it because I know it's, gonna be the sustainable thing to do. But some of our members might. not.
And just to, I guess, to answer Ms. Cabello's, says you're fighting about firefighters that aren't even been hired yet. And my son is 14 years old, 15, I'm sorry. And he already has a plan to try to get into the fire department. Whether he gets in or not, it's on him, right? Why would I want to sell him down the road? You know, why would I jeopardize his future? You understand? So-
Yeah,
keep us
I
the same.
understand that part,
If we have to
and
go- if we have to go down together. I
my
mean,
It's
answer,
gonna- it's gonna-
yeah,
it's gonna- it's gonna
my
keep
response
everyone.
to that was, and I think that was the very initial request when we came to you with this issue that the city has, is that, the issue is that we want your son to be able to have the opportunity to even come to the fire department, and we don't want a situation to become where it becomes too expensive, and then we have to do something drastic to the department. And that was what it was. It was the financial responsibility and the fiscal, and the fiscal responsibility and the sustainability to make sure that that opportunity is there for your son, that the city of Laredo still has a department that we can pay for and that's operational, and provides, the services that are needed, and to provide jobs too. So, so we will look through this, continue looking through this proposal.
And I think overall, the 10%, I think if you factor in the other incentives, the 10% for the EMT, automatically, a lot of the people get that one, and that's the highest one. I don't think it would be a 1.6 cost factor to be able to add those other incentives onto this proposal.
I guess you're saying that each one?
Like
Oh,
each
each other
overall,
one,
because
each other one,
there's
yeah.
less people that actually have their master certification to be able to get that extra 10%. So a lot of people do have 6% or 8%, or some people don't even have any percentages at all, where they get a fixed amount already. So I think the cost factor for that, for the other additional percentage would be a lot less, if not less than half.
And even going down this road, this is a savings along for the city. We had a discussion on implementing new units and the staffing, if the city would want to hire the bare minimum and pay overtime. It's a big reduction in the overtime cost. If right now we do evaluation of what a full-fledged fireman versus overtime costs and what the city would prefer, that even tips the scales even further. So we know that there is areas that the city will use to create savings, and just with the discussion that we're having. And all this reflects, though, is just to get the firemen to move now, there'd have to be some sort of increase.
And part of the information you provided, we have 346 paramedics, and we have 305 on the advanced, intermediate, and master firefighter. Altogether,
17%.
altogether.
17.7. How many in the EMTs?
17.7%.
EMTs, you gave us 346.
So the 17% is giving us, what, 6-point-something million?
Right now, I'm counting 305 pesos today, as of yesterday,
EMT?
and the EMTs.
Oh,
So it's a fluctuation, that number over there is about 2 months old when we got the
okay.
initial file.
That's
But right now, I'm at 305,
Okay,
and the 305 are generating that 1.6.
so then probably the other assignments have gone down as well.
Yeah,
They
más o
retired
menos.
off with them.
Yeah, I kind of was working today as we speak on the intermediates and the advanced. Looks like we have about 81 in the intermediate, and it will probably be about 287,000 more. And on the advanced, we have about 103, which is about another 680,000. So I'm missing the master certification. So I'm
That
still,
one's- that
those
one's
numbers
better.
are still like just throwing
It's-
numbers in
it's
there.
pretty close
Gotta go
to-
double checking, but to get an idea, I think we're probably gonna end up about the same million or million something and compared on all three certifications.
Well, we had 108 on the master, 108 guys, but like you said, those numbers have gone down.
Yeah, masters, I don't have a number yet. That's the one I'm marking.
One of the things that we're
intermediate
looking
and
at
advanced, we
is
had 103.
with those numbers,
Yeah.
whatever it is, if it's a $2, $3, $4 million increase, it's just on the overtime, you're saving $500,000, you pay it back within the contract. Yes, it's an increase from there
When
on
you
out.
say saving on the overtime?
Because
this is what the-
if I work overtime tomorrow with this model, I only get my base pay.
Because your original.
You're never gonna
The incentives never gonna be raised from the
Or
the
you're
total
gonna
amount.
pay it
I think you had told us like on the ad page, it created anywhere from 600 to seven
On the
hundred thousand on the overtime, additional to the,
That's when we just look at the base pay. Ahorita, most of the overtime that we're getting, which is about $3 million per year, most of it is because people are on leave. There's a component of that that is tied to the ad pay, but most of it is because of the leaves.
But a percentage of the overtime
When they
is
get
from
over-
certification-
yeah.
is certification.
Yes.
my certification.
Yeah, you get
increases-
you
Yeah,
get your
so
overtime
if
and
I-
you get your 10%.
If I
on
got
top of
a
that.
My certification
$120,
wouldn't
but
increase
20
anymore.
isn't there, it was only 100.
Right, right, right.
And so that,
But
That's
even though
it.
considering that, most of the overtime is coming from the additional shifts, which is the overtime, the normal overtime.
right,
Yes.
And then there's a component there, 10-20% of it, which is attributed to the
Right.
20%.
so what we're saying is that in the future, overtime will be less, because you're not gonna pay the incentives. You'd be paying upfront.
Well, the overtime is driven because of the lack of manpower.
And
So
we-
if you have a lack of manpower, it's still gonna have
No.
overtime.
Well, but what he's saying, the overtime
Going forward.
is, the ad percentage pay goes into the overtime formula right now.
Yes.
What
This would
the,
exclude
their
Money care
proposal
that you
is
mentioned.
getting the flat rate and taking the overtime
excluded from the
out
overtime.
of that
You
formula.
might not be able to take the overtime out of it, even if it's a flat rate, because
What do you mean?
Automatically.
Well, then that's why, you know.
I'm saying, I don't think there's gonna be an impact because of that.
Why not?
Well,
No,
well,
is it
well,
the
and I
percentage?
guess so that we're not spinning our wheels, that's what I think you guys need to.
Yeah, we need,
discuss
I mean, we
whether
need to
there-
look
there
at
would
it,
be
it
even-
gets really, it's tedious and we need to make sure that we understand all the impacts,
Right.
including the one on overtime, to understand, whether there is any cost savings and what we can calculate that to be. And, we just need to look at the impacts and see what it is. And,
Yeah, because most, like I mentioned, most of the overtime is coming because of the, what do you call, the additional shift we have to hire because because we need to have the 25 vacancies that we have per shift, pretty much. So those 25 vacancies on those 3 shifts is really what's costing the majority of the overtime. There is a component of that we're paying the overtime on that, but it's a smaller amount.
I mean, just,
An average would be like
Not to mention
60% of
the
it.
yeah, I mean,
details.
just historically, like you said, the 10% has grown with the raise, right? Raise percentage, it's grown. Now
Yes.
this is gonna stay the same.
Yes, definitely, that would
Like,
help.
you know what
the
I'm saying?
numbers.
Like,
Yes.
long term, it is a.
Yeah,
savings.
it caps that.
At one point,
Yeah.
it's gonna reverse and the city's gonna save more and more money at one point. What that point is, it depends on the dollar amount that is agreed upon. And that's all we're basically saying, like, our members are, I think,
It's hard to put a number on that, what that potential savings may be, if any, because I remember, I mean, I've been in previous negotiations or talks where we say, well, we're gonna add some more manpower that's gonna take care of the overtime. But as we're growing, it doesn't necessarily materialize.
I think
So
overall that would help the argument, right, to say there's always gonna be overtime, as much as we wanna staff our fire department, right, there's always gonna be overtime.
Yeah.
And I think from our end, you know, this was something that the city asked from us, I mean, I think it's something that we brought to the table because we had been discussing that it's something that we're gonna propose.
And I think, I mean, we are glad that you were kind of looking at it and we're trying to find a medium, and so we appreciate that you're coming forward with a solution. Now, what we need to consider is that solution, something that we can work on, or consider.
well,
It's almost fine.
yeah, if we caucus, it'll be probably till tomorrow, because we do have a lot of work to look, to do, to analyze this. So in speaking about that, does anybody else have any other questions on the ad pay Article 16? I know that we're set to begin at 9 AM tomorrow, but our team has some work to do we've started looking at this, and we're looking at the costing. And so I don't know, we may not be able to start right at 9. We will be here working, but I need to talk to my team and see what time we can expect to be prepared in the morning.
I wanna caucus maybe for a couple minutes?
Yeah, let me caucus for a couple minutes and let's discuss that, so we can discuss the plan for tomorrow and see if there's something we can get done at 9, we can get that done, and then figure out when the,
you let us know.
sure. Okay, we're back on the record at 5:50 PM on October 6, 2022. I talked this with my team and we have some items that we're working on and need to work out, so we're going to adjourn this we're requesting to adjourn this meeting and we'll reconvene at 9 AM and see where we're at that point, so we can open the meeting at 9 and try to figure out how we're gonna, where we are and how we're gonna work through that day, so.
Okay, just guess one thing before we conclude. The breakdown that I requested from the last meeting, is it being completed or being,
Oh, was it the one that you?
Which one? Which one is that?
the breakdown of what was included and how it's
Oh, the
calculated?
55 million?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I sent it to you. Did we print it?
I did not print it, let's
Go
see.
over it?
We did not go over it, but what I can do is I'm going to email it to you now.
Okay.
And we'll get it printed and we can go through it first thing in the morning.
Okay.
Okay? Let me see.
So we can have it to look over so we can hit the ground running.
Okay, I'm gonna get with Jesus and make sure that I have the right one and I'll email it to you and Oscar. Those are the two emails I have right now. And I'll email it right now. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you very
Oh,
much.
Ms. Dante, I did get the email, thank you.
On the,
TML,
TML?
yes.
Okay. Is that it? Are you done, Alexis?
Any?
Yes, I think we're done.